Jazz hands. Jazz hands. Yeah. Welcome to Quest Me, the Star Wars podcast that takes you through legends and new canon. My name is Josh, and I am your forever host and instigator of arguments. Today, we are comparing Star Trek Picard to the Star Wars sequel trilogy. That's right, we're doing a little mini discussion and a deep dive into what was good and what was terrible about Picard and the sequels. And in this episode, we ask the question, who did it better, Star Trek or Star Wars? Before we go any farther, I just want to thank everyone that's in the chat right now. I don't see anyone chatting quite yet, but I see people in there, so that's great. And I wanted to just tell everyone where they can find us and get all that stuff out of the way, because this is going to be a pretty big discussion. So you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram just by searching for the Quest Me podcast. Be sure to like at least one of those pages to get notified about upcoming shows and live streams. We have the conclusion to the original Thrawn trilogy coming up in August, and then right after that, Ahsoka starts. So we'll be doing our normal weekly live discussion about Ahsoka each week. So be sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/@questme. Now we have I know the video said we had a lot of people on here, but things happen, and it's not, Justin and Phil aren't even here. So Phil might show up eventually. Justin was at the Fan Expo today in Denver, and I don't know where he could be. So for now, I am just going to introduce the other guests that we have to discuss this. So I have Michelle from the Crusher Convo podcast, and I have Ro from the Scarif podcast. Michelle is new to Quest Me, where Ro was actually on an episode of, what was that, Obi-Wan?
I think it was Obi-Wan. I don't know. I think it was Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Maybe Mandalorian. I don't know. But anyway, welcome back, Ro, and welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Josh. I know my co-host Jessie was on there for The Mandalorian, so
yes.
I know she couldn't make it tonight, but I will do my best in her stead. So Jessie, shout out to you tonight.
Yeah, and Jessie actually sent me her sheets with all of her
fantastic
stuff for some things. So
wait, there was homework?
There was homework, and I had to do it twice. So,
I heard the story. Yeah.
Yes, technology is wonderful.
Yeah, but how are you? Thanks for coming on, Michelle. How are you? How's Crusher Convo? What's new over there?
Going great. We just had a new episode drop today on the game. We review TNG through the eyes of Dr. Beverly Crusher, a character that is very popular, but often maligned and misunderstood and kind of put to the side. So we kind of try to bring her out and show everybody how awesome we know she is. So yeah, so that episode came out today, and that was with Patrick from It's Got Star Trek guested. And Josh, we have one with you coming up with the bonding, I think, in a couple episodes. So we look forward to, we were very grateful that you came on our pod, and it was an awesome time. It was a tough episode, tough subject, but you helped us raise the roof on that one.
I brought a little
Raise
Star
spirits
Wars to the mix for sure.
Yes, we definitely had Star Wars connections in that one for sure.
That's why I haven't been invited back to Open Pike yet, because
oh no, we are great friends of Open Pike. They definitely supported us through their encouragement to start Crusher Convo, which was started by Jessie. She just asked me to co-host, which I'm like, sure, and here I am. And I know Ro through our chats, and just, it's a really great sci-fi community that we're building, like FSF podcast. And I mean, tons of people, Green Shirt, so many. that
Yeah.
we're grateful for. And thank you, Josh, for inviting us on tonight
Oh, absolutely.
for this
And
big debate and controversial topic.
it should be pretty interesting, I'm sure.
Yes.
Ro, what about you? How's the Scarif podcast going? Anything new over there?
Yeah, we obviously we are mostly a Star Wars podcast, but I was telling you guys we just dropped an episode. My friend Amanda and I were talking about our favorite top 3 Star Trek episodes, the original series. We listed out a couple of episodes and we talked about why we thought they were, our favorites. There was a little bit of overlap because great minds think alike, and obviously we wanted to mention a couple of episodes that were outside the norm. Everybody talks about Space Seed and Mirror Mirror, but we wanted to kind of dive deep into the 3 seasons of the original Star Trek series and really kind of go into some maybe more unknown but really great episodes of the original series. And we had a lot of fun doing that. We dropped that one last Thursday. And like I said in the chat, I think I need more Star Trek friends. I got a whole bunch of Star Wars friends, and obviously, being a founding member of the Red 5 network, there's a lot of Star Wars there, but I need to go into the Alpha Quadrant once in a while.
Well, we're happy to have you, Ro.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
I feel like I'm on the opposite end. Since I joined the little chat group that we have on Twitter, I feel like I have way more Star Trek fans now. And
Oh,
it's
yeah, sure. Yeah, I can see that.
kind of
Taking
making me a little
over.
sad because all I see is Star Trek stuff in my feed, and I'm like, oh man. So
Oh, shots
do-
fired already.
I do make a point.
There
I
it
do make a
is.
point now to. I mean, it's my fault too because I'm also like. I like to help you guys all the shows in there and like retweet and support and stuff like that and listen
You're
to
very
shows.
kind.
So I definitely screw my own algorithm that way, but I've been really trying hard to when I log into Twitter, I'll go search Star Wars hashtags and just like
What's
retweet,
people
retweet.
talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey Claire, good to see you. Thanks for popping in. Yeah, I'm excited for this discussion because Picard season 3 just came out this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as these seasons have come out from Picard, it's just like Star Wars. Like you think about when the sequel trilogy came out, and each movie had its own controversies, and everyone had
Oh,
their
yes.
own crazy opinions, and like
Us
so-
us movie fans we're kind of fickle. We love it, we hate it, and really there is no in between. It's like you either really despise whatever, or you really shill and love it no matter what people say. So there doesn't seem to be like a lot of in the middle of the road kind of takes. It's weird.
There isn't. That's why I kind of wanted to have this discussion because I mean, obviously Star Trek and Star Wars are huge properties and
Right.
millions of fans all over the world and a lot of like divisive opinions when it comes to these shows. I doing a ton of research over the last month for this thing, and like I had to watch a lot of reviews and takes and stuff from Picard because I know the Star Wars trilogy like the back of my hand, even though I've only seen The Rise of Skywalker fully all the way through once. I'll admit it.
Ooh.
I still know that movie really well, and like with Picard, I kind of got fuzzy on some of the details with season 1 and season 2. And then
Well,
going back and
it's
watching them.
Not
and, like,
surprising.
seeing-
With
I
this,
know.
the way it was written, I can understand that.
People
Yeah,
people tend to block out trauma, so I hear you.
Oh, more shots fired.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good episode. Ricky D in the house. Hello, Ricky D. How are you doing? It's good to see you, sir. It's great to see you. Actually, it's really good. Ricky went through some real personal stuff, and it's really good to have him back in the world of podcasting. So hopefully, Best Flicks with Ricky D comes back here soon because that was always a fun show. Anyway, let's get this thing moving on here. I wanted to kind of do it where we break it down. There's 3 different things. There's 3 seasons and 3 movies. So I figured we could compare each movie with each season the way they kind of came out. So Force Awakens against season 1, The Last Jedi against season 2, so on and so forth. And then at the end, we have a culmination of like just everything. Just kind of we'll be the judge, jury, and executioners tonight.
Definitely.
Wow,
So
emphasis on executioners, huh? This
Yeah.
is gonna be wild. I do
Seems
want to
like it.
preface, like, I grew up with both franchises. Jesse is the bigger Star Wars fan of the two of us for sure, but I am repping my Earl Grey tonight with my Star Wars mugs. So I just want to
I
let
love it.
everybody know
I love it.
I am familiar with both franchises. So we'll
And
get into
that's
it.
yeah, that is definitely the cool thing about nerds these days. I think, and Michelle, you mentioned it earlier. Back in the day, we weren't allowed to like both Star Trek and Star Wars. It was either one or not. So it's nice to, I guess as adults, be a little bit more reasonable with our fandom.
Yeah.
They're both fun, and they both have great characters and elements to them. And it's nice to kind of be in this space where we can talk about it in a way that kind of enriches our own group and our own fandom. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
agree. There's a lot more. It's same goes with like Marvel and DC. There's a lot. It's a little still shaky
Yeah,
right now. There's a lot of
yeah,
Marvel
yeah.
people that still don't like DC, but what do I call it? A bitrexsexual. So same with Marvel and DC. I like both properties just as
Sure.
much. I might not like the direction that DC has gone lately. Still love their animated series
Yeah.
and a few of their like TV series. I will always swear by Arrow and the Flash and Titans and stuff like that because those shows were really good. Even Gotham was incredible. But like I feel like there's a lot more people now that are, like you said, just embracing everything instead of just the one thing they have to embrace.
Well,
So,
give me good characters and good plot, a good story, and let's go.
No.
yeah,
Because nowadays you have the technology to do amazing special effects. So it's really the story and the characters for me anyway that draws me in. So
yeah. Looking
you
at
give
you,
me that,
Avatar.
and
Sorry.
I'm in. Right.
um. Oh, there's Jesse from Crusher Convo.
Hey, Jesse,
She's
what's going on?
she's getting ready for bed, but just
But she's,
checking in.
yeah, she's keeping me in line. She wants to make sure I'm repping. So no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So
Always a
I
shout
broke.
out.
Yeah, so I broke this down into 6 different categories, basically for each season, each movie. How the old characters were handled, the plot, the fan service, new characters, each property's effect on canon, and then the overall rating. So I feel like we can go through down the list and just each one, like Force Awakens and Picard season 1. For me, I gave Force Awakens, as far as how the old characters were handled, I gave Force Awakens a 7 and Picard season 1 a 7. I think I want to change that down to a 6 on both just because of writing out all my other answers and stuff for this thing. I think both seasons did okay. Picard didn't really have as many old legacy characters from the Next Generation. You had the Voyager lady, and I think was Deep Space Nine.
7
was
of
referenced
9.
in that. Yeah,
Yes.
7 of 9.
The Voyager lady. Yeah.
Listen,
Captain of
I'm
the
not-
Enterprise now. Yes.
I can't remember names for shit. All right, so
It's okay.
this whole
That's
episode
what I'm here
is gonna
for.
be like that. I'll remember Star Wars, but Picard.
Well, that's why I'm going to depend on you. So we'll depend on each other. That's good.
There you go. So yeah, I would say I would give each property, Force Awakens and Picard, a 6 out of 10 as far as how the old characters were handled. Force Awakens, you never saw Luke. That's a big ding in my book. You saw him at the very end,
Yeah.
even though they toted that he was going to be in that movie. Like the trailers and stuff were like, look, Luke is here, and
For a
you never
second.
saw him. And then Han Solo, Chewie, and Leia. Leia didn't have a lot of screen time, but Han and Chewie really, really did a lot for me as far as like when they first got onto the Falcon and started talking about the Force, and like even when Han got killed, I was like, I jumped up in my seat during Force Awakens. Force Awakens is my favorite of the sequel trilogy, by the way. But I jumped out of my seat and was like, what? And then when Kylo gets shot, I just yelled something like, I was like, that's right, bitch, or something like that. And like the guy sitting next to me was like, dude. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm passionate, all right? Han Solo is one of my favorites, and so seeing him kind of be that hero that's sacrificed in this one, like all the other Star Wars, they repeated the cycle in this movie. You had Qui-Gon in Episode 1, and you had Obi-Wan in A New Hope. Like, they just repeated the cycle. But I thought it was handled pretty well as far as letting him be that inspiration for the new rebellion or whatever. I don't know.
Wait, who was the inspiration of the New Rebellion?
Han
What?
Solo. Han Solo with with inspiring like Rey and stuff to like actually do things.
You mean Ray that he just met her like less than 5 hours ago? That Ray? You inspired her?
I know. I know. Look, I
Okay.
get it. All right, I get it. But the nostalgia in this movie really, really took over for me, and I still love it to this day because of that aspect. And like the way that it ended, you're like, oh, okay, cool. This could go in a good direction.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it could.
we'll talk
Yeah.
about that. But let's go to Michelle. How did you think the characters were handled in each one?
So very similar to you, and I think that whatever fandom we lean toward, we're harder on, right?
Yes.
So I think that I gave The Force Awakens a 7 out of 10, and I gave Picard season 1 a 6 out of 10 because first of all, I'm Crusher Convo. Not even they mentioned virtually every main character from TNG except Beverly Crusher in season 1. And this is not, it's just like the sequel trilogy where they had no idea where they were going to land. Neither did the Star Trek Picard series. So that was not planned. Like Beverly coming out of nowhere in season 3 was not the plan in season 1. So, I kind of, and, I did like Riker and Troy and Nepenthe. That was probably the best episode for me that season.
Yeah.
So seeing the old crew back, the handling of Data trying to close that traumatic death from Nemesis, I think fans really needed that. So that was, I thought, handled well. But I give it a 6 out of 10 because the characters are really ancillary to the story. Like it was obvious that, Patrick Stewart had made it clear he didn't want the TNG crew to be in this because he felt like it needed to be its own thing. And I think it hurt the story. And I liked Soji. You could say Rey and Soji were very similar. You have two female protagonists who were put out there for this. And I think Rey's storyline was not handled as well as Soji's. I think Soji in season 1 had a good story arc. I mean, the ending wasn't great. But I think with Soji, you at least had a really good you had like really good acting and a decent character arc connection to Data, a legacy character, and you kind of knew she had like a full story throughout the series, throughout that season. But a 6 out of 10 because Rios for me, he was interesting but kind of two-dimensional. Raffi I love Michelle Hurd, but there was some like the extremes that they went to and how different they were making it from how Star Trek had been before with Starfleet. With her being an addict, which is a really interesting storyline, this addiction storyline, but they just didn't really go into it. It was just like, again, like a side story. And Girardi, questionable. Look, again, I love the actress, but I felt like you're throwing all these new characters in. 7 of 9 was even a little tough to get into at first. Again, Jerry Ryan did a phenomenal job, but it was the legacy. She's a legacy character to me that she came into her own more. A lot of them came into their own more later. I did like Elnor and Soji, but to me, I was just chuffed about like Geordi, Worf, and Beverly completely ignored. The legacy was completely ignored. With Star Wars, with The Force Awakens, I mean, you had an excellent story for Han and Chewie. I was very devastated they killed Han, though. Leia was kind of just, she was there, but we were all looking forward to her story in episode.
She was just kind of there.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. In episode 9, but it didn't happen, unfortunately, because of the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher.
And Leia was weird in that too because her husband died in that, and instead of comforting the walking carpet that she's undoubtedly been with for the entirety of their relationship, she just walks right past him, straight to Rey, who, as Rose said, only knew Han for 6 hours, maybe.
Yeah. For fans, it doesn't work because for fans, we're like, no, you gotta hug Chewie. And Star Trek has similar issues. Even in season 3, we're like, that's weird. But I think with that, it also is like it was Rey's story. So they were trying to focus on, why would Rey be so devastated? Like, well, that was her mentor. And Leia, again.
Was it?
But I know, was it really?
Yeah, it didn't pan out. It didn't pan out, right? But yeah, the characters in Star Wars, like, okay, Finn, I liked. I liked Poe. I liked them, but I felt like I needed more with them. So it was just a little bit more than Picard season 1, because again, I'm more of a fan.
To a movie,
Yeah.
What about you, Ro? What are your thoughts on the characters of these shows?
Your ratings are spot on. The 6 and 7. It's funny though, because with Star Wars, and The Force Awakens is my favorite of the 3 sequels. With Star Wars is funny because this is an example of creating a movie as a studio instead of creating a movie with creative people. They had I guess they had an agenda. They had just bought Lucasfilm and Star Wars for almost $4.5 billion. I'm sure the Disney executives and the shareholders were like, we need to see a return. What can we do? Let's make this movie. Let's make a couple of $1 billion. For me, I think George Lucas did the heavy lifting to bring the legacy actors back to say, hey, we got one more movie to do, and we are ready to go. And I think George Lucas used that as a bargaining chip to be able to sell the franchise to Disney. I think Disney kind of screwed that up because we don't have a scene, and we'll talk about that, I guess, when we get to
with the 3 of them together,
right?
Yeah, I think that Star Trek did learn from Star Wars.
Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. It was almost like, okay, we saw what they did over there. Let's not do that over there. Let's not do that for season 3. Let's, and then, maybe they had to also, convince, the rest of the actors to come back. I feel like LeVar Burton was an actor that really didn't need to come back. I mean, he does his own thing, and he almost felt like a fish out of water for the most part. I feel in Picard season 3, but
interesting take.
I kind of agree with that a little. He was a little stiff and just kind of like, we needed you here, so you're here.
Yeah. And that's coming from the actor. But getting back to the characters, Michelle, you said something very interesting, and I think the actress that played Rafi,
Michelle Hurd, yeah,
right. So she's great. She was greater in season 3 of Picard than the first season, and I think this is a perfect example of when an actor has a certain script and this is all you have. The script for her, at least in season 1 of Picard, was just horrendous. They set some stuff up with her character, which again was really interesting, but they held back, and I think you can tell from fan reaction, obviously. But I think this is when corporations kind of they set something up and they think they're doing something great, but they really don't pull the trigger and go all the way. And I feel that that does a disservice to not only the characters but the franchise. You have to kind of take risks and maybe change things up a little bit. But it's so weird because I don't know, obviously I think Disney dropped the ball on The Force Awakens as far as legacy characters. And like we mentioned, I think, Star Trek was watching and kind of fixed that in season 3 as far as legacy characters. It's so weird to me that there's a Star Wars without Star Wars actors playing scenes together, or having a plot that brings them together to solve some sort of galactic problem. It's odd.
The new main characters too, because even Poe, Rey, and Finn were never in the same scene at the same time ever,
right?
Except the last bit of. No, they weren't even in that. Like it rarely happened in even Rise of Skywalker. So to me, I feel like the Star Wars series, George Lucas had a script. Like, he had something made for the sequels, and it was supposed to be pretty good, I guess. It was a little more based around, I think, kind of a Thrawn situation. But they threw that script out the window and just was like, JJ, write us a new trilogy. And he wrote like the outline of the 3 movies.
Yeah, he had
And
something different planned for what ended up. And I think I think they told him, we want to play it safe. Can you kind of just rehash Star Wars and then bring it to the new audience because we want our money back?
Right.
They also didn't. They didn't have like a.
Oh, sorry. I'll say it next.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just rehashing stuff like The Force Awakens was like a direct A New Hope remake. You could go on we could have a whole podcast just on that, the similarities between A New Hope and The Force Awakens. You have the droid that carries the plans, you have the reluctant hero, you have the trilogy or the trio of characters. Like there's a lot there that was just kind of a direct remake. But then they kind of fell.
They didn't have the plan, right? And Lucas didn't have a plan for a trilogy when he first made Star Wars. So you could argue that it could have worked, but I think because the directors, again, the visions were so different for each movie. And again, Jesse's saying it in Jesse, but Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike is talking about how it's fan expectation. And it's interesting to look at these 2 series in terms of what they did for fan expectation and fan service, because there's a lot of talk about, member berries and fan service and how much is too much. And I do think that Star Trek Picard ultimately, like when we get to it, I think we'll see why it succeeded where the sequel trilogy of Star Wars kind of fell short. And it's exactly what you're saying. They're not appreciating the characters together. Like they're trying to do character-driven stories, but they're ignoring the character relationships and why they're important. And that's really what fans love. And in The Force Awakens, it was very disjointed because, what did you see? Han and Leia together for a hot second before he gets murdered by his son. Like, how is that satisfying to any Star Wars fan?
Exactly.
And I think like just watching that in the movies with my dad, it was like, what's happening? That's I can't remember if I saw it with my father or not, actually. When did it come out? I don't even remember.
2015.
Oh yeah, I probably did then. Yes. Because I remember we were so excited, but we were excited for the prequel trilogy as well. And that did not, again, even looking at the prequel trilogy versus the sequel trilogy, I still honestly will watch the sequels before I'll watch, the last prequel trilogy movie I will watch more than the sequels, but episodes 1 and 2 were rough for me. So
I'm totally different on that. I love all of.
We're getting into like different territory.
Yeah,
here,
totally.
But,
I have not watched the sequels. I have not watched the sequels since they came out. I think The Last Jedi is the only Star Wars movie that I do not own on physical media. It's just not my movie.
The Rise of Skywalker was the one that I don't own. I don't ever buy that movie.
And I bought it, but I only watched it once.
Yeah. And Last Jedi, oh man, we'll get there. We're gonna get there. I wanted to give the other ratings for our other for Jesse and Jacob. Jesse had the Force Awakens old characters rated at 7 out of 10, and in Picard she had it rated at a 3 out of 10. So,
woo, Jesse coming in with the high heat.
Wow. I'm gonna go ahead and assume I'm gonna read her notes here. So her notes for the Force Awakens say. Legacy characters were handled okay, but the death of Han rubbed me the wrong way. Plot, aka nostalgia, was fine, but too close to A New Hope. Loved Rey. This new canon versus the books does trouble me a little bit, but it does have the right kind of heart Star Wars always had. And then for Picard's notes, she wrote, overall the story was there, but the execution was not. Not having the legacy cast return with Picard seemed off. The new characters were great, but the story needed some polish. Soji was the best. Again, the new canon compared to the books doesn't sit right, but I did appreciate some darker new takes it took. And I can agree with both of those for sure. And we've talked a little bit about the plot, so I will just give my quick thoughts on that and my rating. Sorry, Jacob. Let me say have Jacob's. He said the old characters were handled in Star Wars 9 out of 10, and in Picard an 8 out of 10. So he was a bigger fan than we were for sure. And then as far as plot goes, I rated it an 8 out of 10 on Force Awakens, in parentheses, A New Hope remake, and then a 6 out of 10 on Picard season 1. For me, Picard, just the ending. I feel like they did not stick that ending at all. And it was more of a finale, like a series finale, than it was a season finale. Like, he died. Picard died.
Yeah.
And they transferred his consciousness to a robot.
But
Now
they still kept the disease.
You can
Nah,
you
let him
can
die.
you can no, he didn't have the disease in the golem. It's not a robot, it's a golem. And I did not like this either. It felt totally wrong to have him dying with a bunch of strangers that we just met and 7 of 9. Like, it did not
Yeah.
feel correct. However, you could argue that in season 2 there was an episode of TNG where they had a very similar situation with someone transferring their consciousness into Data, which was interesting. So, like, it's not like people, like, is it you, like the Trill, like, it to me, it's still Jean-Luc Picard. It is really difficult, and I'm glad that season 3 kind of addressed the whole he died thing, but I do like that they just moved on from it and didn't dwell on it. It was not a great choice, but yeah.
Both season 1 and 2, their finales were trash, and then the next season just disregarded that whole finale. And both, season 2 they kind of disregarded Picard dying. Season 3 they disregarded his new love interest.
Yeah,
that he went.
Oh,
back
I got
to.
thoughts
Like,
on that when we get to it,
like,
because season 2 was completely contrived and should have been just Beverly. And Laris did not need to be retconned into a love interest and glammed up in her husband fridge. But anyway, we had a perfectly good love interest from 35 years ago that stayed with the show the whole time. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
This is why I am a big proponent of having creative people create a team to envision, if you're going to do a trilogy, envision the trilogy, envision the story arcs, the characters, and bring all these story elements together in one cohesive story. For me, the sequel trilogy is a pissing contest between directors.
Yes,
one
absolutely.
is contradicting the other and vice versa. And it's like, is this lightsaber important? Yes, it is, but no, it's not. It's like, what the hell? And fans can tell. I mean, we're able to, determine that this is happening. There was no rhyme or reason for a lot of stuff in the sequels, and it pisses me off. And I think with Picard, if you take a look at the series almost as kind of like an extended trilogy, there's that thing again where one team of creatives throws away certain characters and puts them on the back burner, to bring in
Beverly
new
Crusher?
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, God. And who suffers is the fans. I mean, people that have grown up and watched this series, these characters for a really, really long time, whether we're filmmakers or not, and most of us are not, but we can kind of determine how these stories are intertwined because we've been, watching them and living them from the beginning.
Yeah, and it was so bad that Colin Trevorrow left episode 9. Like, they had to bring JJ back because
and it's interesting that JJ did Star Trek as well, and he was not a Star Trek fan, but I actually love the first and third reboot movies and the characters.
The Khan one. I don't even care.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's like didn't make sense. Like, there were just some things that I had real problems with. But as a whole, the reboots and what JJ did with the first one, listen, he wasn't even a fan of Star Trek, and he made a Star Trek movie that could be accessible to new fans, which I thought was really cool, while still tipping the cap to fans and letting us enter in. If we didn't have that reboot, we wouldn't have Star Trek Picard. We wouldn't have Discovery or Strange New Worlds or any of the Prodigy. Well, I guess we don't have Prodigy anymore, but hopefully
that sequel trilogy did kind of put Star Trek back on the map.
And that was JJ. Like, imagine this guy did 2 franchises. The guy's getting murdered for both. And it's like, well, look, he was really trying for especially I think with the Force Awakens. For the plot, for me, I gave it the plot a 6 out of 10 for Force Awakens and 5 out of 10 for Picard season 1, because I did feel like it was a remake of A New Hope, and it just kind of went along. But it was fun. It was an action adventure. I felt like it was a Star Wars movie. Like he made a Star Wars movie, you
Yeah,
know?
and it had potential. It had great potential. Even though it was a little bit of a carbon copy, it had potential.
Mhm.
Oh, it's very exciting. They found Luke at the end. What a great little cliffhanger. But yeah,
Yeah, whereas Picard season 1, it was like this is what I don't like about this serialized storytelling they do today, and why I'm glad Strange New Worlds does not do this. This mystery box storytelling where you drag this mystery out the whole season and it's completely unsatisfying. What were those electronic tentacles that they had to close the portal for at the end of season 1 of Picard? What was that? Oh, they just closed it
about that,
and
yeah.
everything's fine. Like that was the plot of the season. That was the bad guy. That was the prophecy that the Zot Vash Romulans were fighting against. That they sabotaged their own rescue mission on Mars that Raffi was right about, and it was all about this portal that Soji opens, and then Picard gives a speech and he almost dies, and he does die, and Soji closes the portal, and then we never hear about these things again.
It's like the Eternals in the sky.
Yeah, it was just so odd. Like they didn't think about the ending, and you're just left with like, what was that? Like, I think the point was really Data in season 1, and in that kit, that's why I gave it a 5 out of 10. I gave like 50% was the Data story to me, and Soji and that found family and trying to like come to terms with Data's death. Great, you know. Everything else, like what you doing, giving me whiplash with this Zot Vash Romulan thing. That's not. I love the Romulans. Listen, don't get me wrong. I loved Laris and Zaban, his little Tal Shiar vineyard caretakers / secret agent, kick-ass people that protect him on the vineyard. But it just didn't. The plot in Picard was, again, like you said, very dismissive of what came before, and whereas I think Force Awakens kind of embraced it to a point with Han and Chewie.
I think they embraced it too much, trying
Yeah.
to remake the old stuff.
Except when they like killed Han and like Leia felt out of, like, you're just like, what?
Yeah. It's funny because I'm still trying to figure out like why they killed Han, other than Harrison Ford said, "Can you please kill me already?" Come on.
I still think that's
why
all
they did it.
There was like an interview with him a long time ago where he's like, if I ever go back to Star Wars, they're killing me off. Like,
Yeah.
I
mean, he
wanted
wanted to be in
he wanted to be
movies.
killed off in the original trilogy already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that would be the only explanation, and you couldn't kill Luke because, I mean, well, obviously we did, but like
he wasn't in the movie.
He would have been too much. I don't know. There were a lot of questions with that for sure.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the tell-all book that explains all the happenings behind the scenes at Lucasfilm during the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. What did you rate the plot for those, Ro?
The plot for The Force Awakens, like a 5.
Okay.
The plot for Picard 1, like a, I want to say
-4. No.
you know what? I want to say 6 because I remember, watching, I guess
there was so much intrigue in there and you wanted to watch it to see what happened.
It was exciting. I mean, even, it had some interesting stuff, and it's always great when you see these old actors back in the saddle. I mean, watching Indiana Jones 5, I mean, it's great to see Harrison Ford back as the character because we grew up with him. And I feel the same way about when they announced Picard. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. Patrick Stewart back in the saddle and back in the captain's chair per se. And this is what fans want. But I think sometimes studios don't read the room correctly, and either they do too much fan service or like not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. There's no balance.
Yeah. Jacob rated the plot of Force Awakens a 5 and of Picard a 4. And then and Jesse rated it an 8 for Force Awakens and a 7 for Picard. I think, man, I'm gonna kind of blast through the rest of my ratings. If we keep sticking on Force Awakens, we're gonna be at this for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to go through the list here, and I'll give my final thoughts on each one. And then if you guys want to do the same thing, we can move on to the next comparison. I gave the fan service of Force Awakens a 7, new characters a 7, effect on canon an 8, and the overall rating of Force Awakens an 8. For Picard, fan service was a 5. I feel like there wasn't enough. The new characters, a 6 out of 10. My favorite new character was surprisingly Rafi. The guy, I don't know. I liked him.
Oh, you mean
You mean the Star Trek Han Solo?
Rios? You mean Rios?
Rios. I'm sorry. Rios.
Yeah.
Yes, Rios. I liked him. And then the effect on canon was a 6. Again, dying at the end. Anyway, and then my overall rating for Picard season 1 was a 7, which I'm actually going to lower that to a 6 because the more research that I did on this show, the more I'm like, God, yeah, I forgot. That was kind of. So. As far as Force Awakens goes, like it was my favorite of the sequels. It had so much potential. It gave us, we went back to the galaxy far away, and we got to see some old characters. We got some new characters. We got some Force usage. We got some lightsabers. We got some sweet new villains. You know, there was mystery behind Snoke. There was mystery behind Kylo Ren, and if. You know, he seemed like he would come back to the light side, and he would just be battling those demons for so long. And then, once he kills Han Solo, you're like, oh no, this little he's a bad guy. Like, I don't want him to be good ever again. Like, I want him dead.
Right.
And it laid the groundwork for what could have been, I feel like, a really good story. Now, Last Jedi, I have a lot of opinions about Last Jedi that you guys might not agree with. I kind of, at this point, after Rise of Skywalker came out, I think Last Jedi is the best one out of the sequels.
I'm leaving.
And
Don't go,
but the only reason is because Last Jedi should have been the end. That should have been the end of the series. Should have just ended it there. Because why keep going? Like, you killed off the main Jedi. You killed off the main villain. Like, do a spin-off series at that point and finish up Kylo's series.
Well, to your point, I will say maybe Leia was supposed to be the main Jedi, and we didn't get it. And I think that's a big problem with the third.
Well, they did say that that Leia was going to be playing a prominent role in the third movie, and unfortunately,
each movie was each character's different movie. Basically, Han Solo had the first one, Luke had the second one, and Leia was supposed to have the third one. And be like that character that clearly she was going to be bringing Kylo back to the light. Like, that's what was going to happen for sure if the story would have played out. I'm pretty sure. So anyway, and as far as Picard season 1 goes, it was fun. I was so excited to see my, TNG, like a sequel to TNG, and I was really pumped for it. Again, it had a lot of intrigue for the whole series. I wanted to know what was going to happen, and then when I found out what happened, I was like, well, maybe they can stick the landing in season 2. Let's see what happens there.
Whoops.
So,
wah, wah, wah.
Yeah,
my screaming goat.
What would you say, Michelle, as far as for the rest of it? Give us.
Yeah, so I'm pretty on track with you on The Force Awakens. Fan service 7 out of 10, just because of what they did to Han and Luke not being in it. New characters 7 out of 10, just because I don't feel like they were as well drawn as they could have been, and they were kept apart kind of, but I did like them. Effect on canon 7 out of 10, and overall rating 7 out of 10. I just felt like, yeah, it was like a mid Star Wars movie. They were leaning into nostalgia. They had like the Millennium Falcon. They had the old characters felt in character for the most part. And the special effects were great. The use of humor, it felt like a Star Wars movie, but kind of like just a remake, and it wasn't super satisfying because you didn't have like your 3 faves or like that original series coming together. So
but for any banter between Han and Luke, that's
yeah, it's really odd. And then Picard season 1, fan service 6 out of 10. Again, Where's Beverly? Where's the rest of the TNG crew? We'll get into Beverly Crusher and why she should have been in season 1, the thing to begin with later. New characters favorites, 7 out of 10. Again, not super well drawn, much like The Force Awakens for the most part, but I did love them, especially Soji and Elnor. Super salty about them not being in season 3. Effect on canon, 6 out of 10. Didn't love what it did to Picard. I know that they showed Patrick Stewart did not want to do a TNG sequel. He wanted Picard to be different, but I feel like it was so jarring. They did do a good job like getting him there, but it almost felt like the change was so drastic. And then the effect on canon, 6 out of 10, because where's the again, the effects on TNG. And then the overall rating was a 6 out of 10, just because, again, I felt like this doesn't, it's effects on TNG I didn't care for, and it just, it just kind of felt like Bruce Maddox being killed by his ex-girlfriend because she was brainwashed by the Zatvash and the mystery box stuff and all that. But I did enjoy Soji and Data and that kind of closing the loop on that story. Didn't like Picard dying, but they brought him back, and it is what it is. So we move on.
What about you, Ro? Final thoughts and ratings.
So I forgot most of what happened in season 1 of Picard, so I have no clue what you guys are talking about.
No, and that's why I had to go back and look, because there was I forgot a lot about it, and the Data stuff and like the tentacles at the end. I was like, oh yeah.
And the ships, the copy and paste ships that Riker flew in on.
Too funny. No, I mean, I think I'm gonna just kind of echo what you guys are saying. I mean, to me, The Force Awakens had some great potential. And like Michelle was saying, it felt like Star Wars. Oh, because it was Star Wars, a copy. But yeah, it's season 1. Let's see, season 1 Picard. Yeah, I mean, somebody in the chat said something about fan expectations as far as Picard. And I've got a whole argument regarding, how we as fans have fan expectations. And I don't think it's a bad thing because, if you want a cheeseburger, you're going to McDonald's, you're probably going to get a cheeseburger. If you want, it's different for everybody. And I don't think fan expectations is a bad thing. I don't think fan service for the most part is a bad thing. There's a reason why these franchises make, buku money. As you can see behind me, I have spent my hard-earned money on things that I like, and it happens to be Star Wars. So if you're gonna do something that will, generate, me taking out my wallet to give you my dollars, then service me, damn it. I'm a fan. But yeah, there's obviously a delicate balance there. But yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you guys on all your points.
Yeah. So then I'm just gonna quickly run through Jacob's last things. I know I wish that everyone was here, but he rated Force Awakens an 8 out of 10, and he rated season 1 of Picard a 7 out of 10. So seems like he liked him for the most part. And then as far as Jessie's rating, she rated Force Awakens an 8 and Picard a 7. So I think we're all kind of on the same page as far as those go. Now moving on to Last Jedi. Let's not do that, because this is a fun conversation. So
I might have to get something stronger than 7-Up if we're going to start talking about the last.
I actually have a little track from Jesse of Sudden But Inevitable. He sent us his opinions on all of these, so I feel like this is probably a good time to play that and kind of hear his thoughts. I think he did. I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't listen to it. I just threw it on a video and put it up here. So hopefully it's PC, but knowing Jesse, it probably is. I believe he rated or went through each individual thing or something. So here we go. I'm going to play Jesse's phone in here.
And sci-fi fans alike, this is Jesse from Open Pike Night, the Strange New Worlds podcast where your personal logs are the prime directive. Now, of course, I started my podcasting journey with Josh way back at the start of QuestMe, and you know that I couldn't let an opportunity like this just pass me by. So here is the piece that I have brought for you today. I apologize that I could not be there in person. Now, I am well known as not being a Star Wars detractor, but Star Wars isn't my favorite. Star Trek is. That having been said, I had a very uncomfortable feeling through all of season 3 of Star Trek Picard of, okay, is this the Rise of Skywalker? So, what I have brought for you guys today is the following sentence, and then you can discuss it. Picard season 3 is the Rise of Skywalker, but with much better acting. Okay? Now, I don't know if this is due to the fact that Picard season 3 was mostly legacy characters that we already have a lot of history with, and Rise of Skywalker was kind of one character that we have history with and a bunch of new characters. But I will say, I don't want this to come across as a slam on the actors in the Star Wars franchise. I just think they had nothing to work with for Rise of Skywalker. And if you have listened to Open Pike Night, you know that I am constantly saying that the actors are what makes some of Star Trek's less impressive plots really truly work. So, discuss. Thanks again, and don't forget to listen to Open Pike Night.
I'm dizzy.
Should have screened that one because we clearly went to Rise of Skywalker in season 3. I could agree with that. Because Rise of Skywalker was all about the fan service. Like that's all that they wanted to do was like bring people back in. That's why you had
and space horses.
And space. Jesus Christ.
You know, I think that where I and Jesse, you know, I love you, bro. But I will say, I think, and we do share similar opinions. I am critical on Picard season 3 a little bit. But I do think that they landed it much better than Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
There wasn't like the whiplash. There wasn't the, there was like, I actually wrote down some, when we get to it, yeah, there's a comparison between the Borg and Palpatine, for sure. But I think that, yeah, the acting definitely raised it up. There are questionable storylines that I have, but I think that ultimately, Star Wars had 2 hours, Picard had 10. They were able to tell a more complete story, and it just worked better to me.
But you know what? Let's not create excuses for a creative person being able to only use 2 hours. I mean, there are great movies that are under 2 hours. So,
Sure.
with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah. And we will obviously discuss more of season 3 and Rise of Skywalker. I feel bad now because I should have screened that and played it before we did episode 3.
It's a good primer. We'll circle him back. It's like a little preview.
We'll definitely harken back to that for sure. We finally got my other co-host in the stream here. Phil is joining us from Pirate Land.
Hello.
How are you doing, sir? It's good to see you.
Doing well. Hey, Ro. Good to see you again, man.
Hey, good to see you.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
Hi, Michelle.
Phil, Michelle,
I'm
Michelle,
good.
Phil.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Same, likewise.
We just finished up our Force Awakens in season 1 talk, so you're here for the rest of the good show. Did you want to give us a quick rating for Force Awakens? What was your overall rating for Force Awakens?
Ooh. I'd probably call it an 8.
Okay.
8 out of 10.
And what about Picard season 1?
Same, honestly.
Okay.
Season 1 was it was finding its feet a lot, and they were still kind of trying to figure out what they were doing with a lot of the streaming Star Trek stuff. So,
yeah, that makes sense. All right, cool. So let's move on to Last Jedi in season 2. I'm just going to give you my overall rating for Last Jedi and season 2, and then I'll give you my thoughts that I've written down, and then we'll go from there. So my overall rating for The Last Jedi was a 5 out of 10. My overall rating for Picard season 2 was a 4 out of 10. As far as The Last Jedi I wrote all this down. So in what's arguably the most controversial Star Wars movie of all time, we get a dozen wrenches thrown into our little fan fantasy of what Star Wars is/was. Before The Rise of Skywalker was released, I did think this to be the weakest Star Wars movie ever. First time watching it, nostalgia took over, and I was back to 8 years old seeing my favorite character, Luke. But over time and many more views, I slowly fell into The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars movie ever trap. The story had the most basic plot in the galaxy, and the new characters, Rose and DJ, were just there to be a distraction from a slow-moving car chase in space. This movie was more of a finale than anything, and I kind of left the theater wondering where the hell do they go from there. And apparently Colin Trevorrow thought the same thing because his story was directly contradicting what Rian Johnson made. Now, look, Rian Johnson did make a good story. He made a good story, and it really could have worked, but it was in the middle of two separate stories. So it was kind of just out of place. I will say I do like The Last Jedi a lot. Over time and watching it, I still do really like that movie. It's just the placement of it and where they went with it kind of destroyed a lot of stuff. You know, they had such potential with Force Awakens, and Rian Johnson could have still made a good movie, but he just kind of disregarded a lot of stuff. I mean, Luke. In my eyes, Luke would have, and in a lot of fans' eyes, Luke would have never just hermited out because because he felt bad. I mean, I feel like Luke is more of that wonder kid that goes on an adventure to solve what was going on. I don't think he would have just automatically tried to kill Ben Solo. That was really strange to me, and him just tossing the lightsaber behind his shoulder was also like, what? And then giving up on the Force completely. I mean, I understand they wanted to move away from Legends and what those stories did, but God, to just really disregard everything that Luke was or is, even in old movies, was kind of a gut punch, you know. I still will say the effects were wonderful in this. There was
they better be for $200 million.
Yeah. Some of the things that happened were a lot of fun. Canto Blight was the most meaningless story thread ever put into Star Wars. They just needed to get rid of Rose and Finn for a little bit, and I don't think they knew what to do with them. Princess Leia flying in space was also interesting. I think that was a missed opportunity to kill her character off there instead. Let her be the one to go and let Luke realize that he needs to come back to the light because of what's going on. But I mean, instead of doing Leia off, they just killed Akbar off screen, which is kind of weird as well. I mean, again, I rate it as a 5 because it's not the strongest movie, but compared to The Rise of Skywalker, this movie is leaps and bounds better. That's my personal opinion, obviously. And everyone in this movie had so many opinions. It was, like I said, the most divisive movie for Star Wars fandom that was ever made, for sure, which it will go down in history as that, hands down. Now, I'll give my brief Season 2 right up here, and then we'll go on. So Season 2 was seriously the worst Star Trek season I think I've ever watched. I got extreme cases of plot whiplash and couldn't get behind another Borg threat. Although there were bright spots in the season, I think Season 2 left a lot to be desired, even as far as their political views. I mean, you had basically ICE in this, and what a perfect example of Star Trek using current events to further their plot. Man, these fireworks are going to drive me nuts.
Happy 4th, everyone.
Yes,
yeah.
happy 4th.
but you know that was cool. They brought that in, but there was nothing about it. Like he got taken by ICE, and then you never see him again. You know, like he gets out of ICE, and that's it. No big deal. They don't try and like talk about it like Star Trek normally does, or like give some sort of life lesson that Trek normally does. It was just kind of like, hey, look at this. This is kind of lame, right? All right, moving on.
I would agree that that's one of the biggest failings in Season 2 is that they drop a lot of the, hey, here's your lesson moments that Star Trek is, previously at least known for.
Yeah. But those are, I still liked Raffi in this a lot. I didn't really like his decision at the end to stay
You mean
back, although it made
Rios.
sense. Rios. God, I keep doing this. My bad. Rios, the guy.
Rios, Raffi. Yeah.
For some reason, I want to call him Raffi. He just seems like a Raffi to me, But his decision to stay in the past was a little weird to me, and I guess it kind of makes sense. And if he didn't want to be on season 3, then yes, that makes sense to write his character out. Bringing Whoopi Goldberg's character, but not bringing her character in was kind of weird. She was in at the end, I think, to kind of settle the story, to be like, all right, here's a wrap up. But it definitely the weakest Star Trek I think I've ever watched. Let's bring Phil's eating. Let's have Michelle's opinions here. Let's have your ratings and stuff for Last Jedi and season 2.
Sure, just give the overall and then
let's
kind
do
of
the overall, and
Mhm.
then obviously we're gonna discuss things as it.
All right. Well, Jesse from Open Pike is going to be a little disappointed here, probably. And I have reasons for this. I gave The Last Jedi a 6 out of 10, and I gave Picard season 2 a 4 out of 10. So The Last Jedi, I don't think I've rewatched this movie a couple of times. I think my biggest issues were really with Luke in this movie. The handling of Leia, the handling of the new character, some of the new characters like Rose, all of these, like Rose, Vice Admiral Holdo, like they all had potential to do awesome things, and it was an interesting story. But I felt like Rose and Finn on this side journey, I got what they were trying to do, but I wasn't digging it. And Luke, yeah, I think Mark Hamill would agree with you. It's such a 360 from his character. And listen, characters can change, characters can do bad things. I know Jesse had said, hey, he followed his father's path. But that wasn't the prophecy, and it like negates some of what happened. And whenever you start messing with beloved things, I don't want to say canon because I feel like that stirs up a whole other debate. But whenever you start messing with like the OG of any franchise, it starts to get a little, and Luke, to me, like flipping the lightsaber, okay, like he's, the scene with him and Yoda was very powerful. I thought I really liked that.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
But like just the dismissiveness of Han's death, like not dealing with Han's death. The Rey of it all, where we weren't sure. Like I kind of liked that she was a nobody, but like I wasn't digging the Rey Kylo whatever they were doing in that movie.
Reylo crush.
I love that they came. Yeah, I love that they came together at the end, but it felt like there was just constant whiplash. Do we want Kylo to be good? Do we want him to be bad? Do we want him to be with Rey? Do we like what do we want?
No plan.
Yeah. So the movie felt a little whiplashy to me. And then Leia in space. She was in a coma most of the movie. That was my big problem with it. They did not utilize Leia again, and they lost their opportunity. And I think that's the biggest crime of The Last Jedi, not utilizing Carrie Fisher well in either of those two movies. And it's just heartbreaking. With Picard season 2, it was just a dumpster fire because of COVID, right? And because they had to change showrunners mid-season because Terry Matalas had to shift gears to season 3, and so I think Akiva Goldsmith took the reins, and it just became a different story. And there were things that were problematic. Like, great, let's deal with Picard's childhood trauma, but like, let's have a warning maybe that you're gonna show like, somebody making themselves unalive. Like it's like that was very jarring to a lot of people because it's Star Trek. And like you said with ICE and immigration, it was like, well, you're talking about the butterflies and don't mess with the timeline. So many butterflies. Rio's staying back. Oh, that was always supposed to happen. But Q was doing it. The Q of it all. He did not get a great send-off because we don't know why he was dying. We don't know what was going on with the continuum. We don't know, you know, his motivations at the end were because he cared for Picard, but he belted Picard across the face in the second episode. Like, you know, he beat him up, like, you know, and just his motivations and what Q was doing. And then you have to have another Sung. Soji was completely dismissed. They made Issa Briones a new character, Kore.
It wasn't even Soji anymore. It was just...
No, you threw in Wesley Crusher at the end, which, okay, at least
For
we...
what reason?
For what
I'm sorry.
reason? I know.
Because they knew he wasn't going to be in season 3, and they had to explain that he was still alive, because it becomes very confusing in season 3. So, you know, it's like these throwaway things, and like they didn't know where they were going to land. And Guinan, like, again, they start off the plot with Laris trying to get with Picard. And it's like, why can't you love Picard? And yet they don't mention the basically the love of his life, who the fans love, Beverly Crusher. Like, this is the time to mention Beverly, and they don't. And they make it all about his romance and all about that. But what does he do? He goes home to Laris, who wasn't Talon, okay? The person that he's flirting with the whole season and like discovering things about himself with. It's like if you were dating a twin, right? And then you went off and you had this, oh, let me like spend time with your sister for a while. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it's ick. And so like, oh, he should end up with Laris. Why? You fridged Zaban. You killed him. I know the actor wasn't available, but, and if you look at the makeup, you know, she was a warrior in season 1. In season 2, they glammed her up. You know, and I have massive feelings about, like, she was a caretaker. There's dynamics there. I'm like, why do we have to do this again? And you're, you know, and then just, yeah, that story was all over the place. So Picard season 2,
And that's,
I love the beginning. I love the first episodes of the Stargazer. I thought it was sleek. It had a really promising start, but then you've got like the good Borg at the end. Like
that, and that's the
you
thing,
know?
is it did have a very promising start, because you're like, oh shit, now they're back in time, and oh man, the Borg threat was, you know, like I said, I wasn't like wanting it, but it was still kind of cool because it was a new set of Borg, and you're like, oh man, this could be interesting. But then come to find out it's Jurati, who was one of my, you know, she's a big crush of me right now, like, oh baby, but like, she ends up being the Borg queen, and it's like, no,
Because they were
why?
getting
How
rid of characters.
dumb.
They're like, you can't be in season 3, Rio, so we have to create a love story for you, and you stay back in time. Like, you know, and Jurati, you have to become the Borg queen, because we can't. And Soji, we're just not even going to explain where you go. And Elnor, we're going to kill you and bring you back to life, but then you're going to just go away.
Disappear.
And then
he's not even in the 3rd season.
Yeah.
And like, that was the whole point for Rafi, was to get her son back.
Yeah, they were like,
I
we're
used that name
found
right, didn't I?
family, and that's all erased in season 3.
Yes,
like, no mention
yes.
of Soji or Elnor. They're all
Right.
Season 3 is all about Picard becoming a father. I'm like, he's been a father since he like had Wesley Crusher on the Enterprise. I'm sorry,
Yes.
that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Kind of new, yeah.
I'll coming in hot with that one. But anyway,
I always had a theory that, you know, Wesley was actually Picard's son the whole time.
everybody
anyway. I mean,
does.
everybody
But
does.
Beverly would never cheat on her husband. People,
No.
that didn't happen. That's why they had to have a new son in season 3.
Phil, Jesse says, "Help me, Pirate Phil. You're my only hope." So let's get your opinions on Last Jedi in season 2 and see where we're at here.
All right. Well, hi everybody. Yeah, freshly back from working at the Colorado Renaissance Fair. Hi.
Phil and I actually
So-
got to meet in person for the first
Yeah.
time ever last weekend at the Ren Fair, which was pretty cool.
Yes, we actually have like photographic evidence of us being in the same place at the same time. It's kind of
Yeah.
horrifying.
It's weird.
And
But-
yes, Ricky, that's why I'm here, making all the nonverbal contributions. No, so Last Jedi, at the time, I would have probably called it a 9 out of 10. You know, in the moment, you know, seeing it in the theater, I would, without allowing other people's thoughts on it to sway me too much, I would probably have revised it back down to about a 7.
Okay.
And I was trying to keep up with the novels and various other things as those were coming out at the time too. So I was probably more invested in some of the side characters, you know, some of the newer characters. So I enjoyed it in the moment. I have not really gone back to it other than like reading back through stuff about it to get ready for tonight.
Yeah.
And then Picard season 2. Michelle, I gotta agree, it was all over the place. I was very, very disappointed to see how they were handling writing a lot of the characters were getting written out of the show, and it was a mess. It was a lot of threads that could have gone places that just got dropped. And I grew up on Next Generation. I mean, as I'm guessing, basically we all did. I grew up on Next Gen. It was the Star Trek I would sit and watch with my grandparents. So getting to see, Brent Spiner come back and do more characters.
But he was awful in season 2. Not as acting.
He was but his
not
character.
as acting, but like the character was just so ridiculous. Like that whole plot line was ridiculous. Let's hit Picard with a car. Like
let's hit him with a Tesla.
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
then he goes into some trauma coma that Talon, not Laris, Laris has to get him out of. Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole relationship developed into nothing because
Talon wasn't Laris.
Just they in all reality, both of them were a mess. The second season of Picard and Last Jedi were absolute messes.
So Jesse's big question is
it better? Is it better than Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker? I
break his heart.
I don't know about better, but it was so different from the other formulas that we'd seen in Star Wars before. It was such a throwback to classic like World War II movies with the bombing run, with the stern chase. All of that was such a throwback to the like World War II movies that Rian Johnson was a huge fan of when he was a kid. So I enjoyed those elements of it for being so different.
Rian Johnson was never a kid.
Let's just say it had better. There's some better scenes in, right? Like
there's some absolutely incredible scenes.
Yeah, I would say like separate scenes are really excellent.
But you were right. Carrie Fisher was absolutely tragically, obviously, wasted in that movie. And not the way she used to be in some of her other stuff.
Not fun. Yeah, not in a fun way.
Wow.
No, I adore Carrie Fisher, and I miss her very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Miss you, Space Mom.
Yeah, and it's definitely Jesse's gonna unsubscribe. That's too bad.
When was he ever subscribed? Get out of here, Jesse. No, I admired it for doing more to try to mix up the Star Wars formula. The only other Star Wars thing that I could think of at that point in that time period, the only other thing to try to mix that formula up that much was Rogue One.
Mm-hmm. And that movie was fantastic, for sure.
Yeah, top tier.
Yeah, no, definitely,
absolutely.
So, and I had held off, honestly, on watching season 2 of Picard. I'd held off until, honestly, a few weeks ago. Just, again, getting ready for tonight. I, started binging through season 2 and 3 because I loved the first season of Picard for its own faults. I still loved the first season of Picard. And I knew that just from what I'd seen around as season 2 was coming out, it's like, I don't know how much time I'm going to need to devote to this outside of the 10 hours of actual screen time. And it had its moments too. It definitely had some clever ideas, but some of it felt like rehashing a lot of the movies. We got the whole First Contact bit with the Borg time travel storyline. We got a little bit of Star Trek Nemesis with Data, who wasn't Data.
Oh yeah.
We got just
They tried. They did try.
They tried, and
sure.
and
they failed.
They did well enough to give us season 3, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
because
Ro,
yeah,
I would say Ro, let's
yeah.
I know you have some thoughts about The Last Jedi in season 2, so let's hear them.
So for me, season 2 of Picard was a chore to watch. It was such a mess, and I enjoyed season 1 of Picard, like Phil says, with all its faults, but I still enjoyed it. But season 2 was, oh my god, it was horrible. Um, there was a lot there. There was a lot there that again they tried, they swung, and they missed. And it's funny because the Borg are, I think the Borg are everybody's favorite, Star Trek villain. They were created, for the TV show back in the day, and they're great. They were a formidable opponent. They had some really cool, powers, and the concept of the Borg is really fascinating from a purely science fiction standpoint. And I think bringing them into Star Trek was great. I think throughout the 90s, I think they might have been overused because obviously the fans really enjoyed, seeing the Borg. But, from time to time, you'd see them in every, there was a lot of Star Trek in the 90s on the small screen on TV, and every so often.
Voyager, especially.
Yeah. So, so it's interesting. And I love me some Borg Queen. I think the Borg Queen, the movie, when we first see her and you see her torso coming down, attaching to the rest of the body, man, that was hot. That was hot. That was hot, baby.
Yeah. One of the most iconic scenes in science fiction. And the behind the scenes shit for how they did that is super cool too.
Yeah,
Directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dude's a wizard behind the camera. Really
and also
is.
a shout out to Annie Wershing, though, who passed away, who played the Borg Queen in season 2
I think she
of
did
Picard.
a great job.
She did wonderful.
She did a phenomenal job, and for a while it was indistinguishable between the two actresses. And I'm like looking, I'm like, oh man, they brought her back. They didn't they? But she did a really, really great job portraying the Borg Queen. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the characters that surrounded the second season of Picard. And again, I think the actors are great, but the roles that they took on, the writing of season 2 was just abysmal. Some of the characters went over to season 3. We talked about, Rafi, and I think her role in season 3 was it was a lot better written, and there was some stuff there that were great. That was great. But yeah, man, season 2 of Picard, I don't know what they were thinking.
It was kind of rough.
I
totally agree that it was more of a chore to watch through that. I remember every week being like, ugh, the new episode's out. Ugh, isn't this over?
Right. Yeah.
Well, you just were wondering what the point was, and the time travel of it all, and will Elnor get resurrected? Like the kill, and what is happening with Q?
And the
he
Q
felt very
thing,
ancillary to everything too.
Yeah, I don't know why they brought him in.
I mean, they propped him up to be the main villain of season 2, and it would have made sense if he was. Like, what?
Yeah, sure.
Why not throw them to different periods in time multiple times? And
I mean, Q's the reason that we have the encounter with the Borg in the first place.
Right.
The OG encounter with the Borg is,
and there was no tie-in.
There
would have been a great tie-in somehow to tie them in, and
like them working together or
something.
Well, it's like they tried to do Tapestry a little differently and just whiffed because they were trying to do too much. And also, I think the COVID protocols played into it. They needed to do something in LA outside, especially you're trying to be considerate of, certain, especially the older, those who are,
sure,
compromised or whatever. So I think that plus changing the showrunners really, I think Terry was even surprised with some of the ending. It sounded like in interviews, not surprised, but like, oh, I didn't know they were going to do that, because he had plans for season 3. I don't know why they wrote the Borg into season 2, knowing they were going to bring it into season 3 when they already touched on it in season 1. But it's a continuing problem. But the Borg are awesome. Like, they're awesome if you make them a formidable opponent that makes sense, for the story.
Which is why I loved how they were implemented in season 1 of Picard.
Right.
Because
it was more the XBs. It was about their story.
We got Hugh. We got Icheb back.
Who got killed off for no reason. Yeah.
That broke my Voyager that broke my Voyager loving heart. I just
Well, not even Icheb. Like, at least his death forwarded Seven's plot. Again, it was a fridge death, but you had but you also had Hugh dying for no reason. That was ridiculous in season 1.
I mean, but he was kind of in it for no reason too. So
yeah.
I mean, it was a connection between Picard and the Borg that wasn't, Locutus.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So Last Jedi then.
Oh my God. What's as far as rating? What's less than 0? A 0 out of 10.
All right.
I absolutely despise that movie for a couple of reasons. I think Rian Johnson is overrated. I think he thinks of himself too much. I think there were people.
Knives Out fan, huh?
No, it's banned in my household. So getting back to what Michelle was talking about regarding Luke, I think I think this is probably the biggest gripe that a lot of fans have. Luke was the new hope. Luke was the one that saved his father from the dark side. It takes a lot to be able to believe that you can do that, and then all of a sudden now in this movie he's like, nah, never mind. It does not make sense. And Mark Hamill, stated it, for a long time afterwards. And I know he was forced to retract his statements. No one is going to ever convince me that it wasn't a request from Lucasfilm. But he lived and breathed the character for so many years. I think he's entitled to the opinion. I understand that, that dialogue or that narrative kind of fueled the folks that were burning action figures on YouTube, and I'm not one of those. I'm proud to say, but
I don't think I ever saw that.
Oh yeah, don't worry.
Action figures
don't worry about it. You don't need to see it.
Whoa.
So I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of the sequel trilogy to begin with, but The Last Jedi is probably a film that will go down in history as breaking the lore of Star Wars. Not the lore, just breaking the franchise. I think. We saw evidence of it. After the release, and people were talking about it, and then Solo was released, and nobody wanted to see Solo because they wanted to vote with their pockets regarding The Last Jedi.
Right.
And
which I enjoyed Solo.
Yeah, I love Solo. I watched it in the movie theater. I watched it in the movie theater. I don't regret it, and I enjoyed it a lot.
My little Solo popcorn tin and
stuff. Yeah. So 0 out of 10 for many reasons, and
I think a lot of people agree with you on that too. The whole breaking of Star Wars. Yes, Jesse, we understand Star Wars is made for kids. Yes, actors aren't writers. Yes, that all is fine and dandy. But at the same time, what Rian Johnson kind of did, he wanted to make things different, right? He wanted to make it go in a different direction and give a 360 and stuff. But I think he just kind of did it in the wrong ways. There was other things you could have done. Like I said, killing off Princess Leia would have been a pretty big deal, and it would have made a lot more sense to do that. And then,
then she wouldn't have had anything to do. Like, she ended up not having anything to do. But I think that you don't want to fridge, you don't want to fridge Leia. I do think that Luke at the end, at least he had a strong. Yes, we can argue about he used the Force across the galaxy thing. I love that reveal when Kylo Ren goes to rip him, and then it's Force Luke.
Yeah.
I know people hate it. I know they hate that Luke died from projecting himself across the galaxy.
It was
That-
so hard. Oh,
Listen, it is. I mean, I do think that there are limitations to the Force, and I'm okay with that.
but why was Luke such an asshole to his nephew? I mean, okay,
that's what I disagree with. That Luke Skywalker, after all he went through to save his father from the dark side, his father who massacred, who's basically Hitler in space, he's going to kill his nephew because he's afraid he's going to become Darth Vader. Okay, maybe because PTSD from his father, but I think that he would have made
That
it
was so
maybe had a
extreme,
different
though.
approach. It's kind of odd that Luke, because that's what sets Ben off, right? Like you tried to kill me. I would be pissed about that too. And it makes Ben Solo's story make a little bit more sense that Luke Skywalker would do
Tried
that
to kill him.
right, because out of
Right.
fear. But it does tell an interesting story in that even your heroes can fall, and even your heroes, can fail you. And I think Picard was trying to do that too. Patrick Stewart was very adamant. Again, actors aren't writers. This is part of the problem. He was very adamant that Picard had to be different, that he grew over 20 years. Yes, people change, but they don't change usually they don't change who they are tremendously.
To the core.
Yeah,
And
at the core. Yeah,
yeah, it is
absolutely.
hard. And I think with Luke, that moment where he decided to try to kill Ben, or he had that momentary, maybe I'm going to kill him, and he lights up the lightsaber. That was there any coming back from that, and then not being there for his sister, like the fact that he,
all of that
it
is
just breaks
really
fans'
screwy.
hearts.
It really
It's-
is.
I
There's an adage that says evil wins when good men do nothing. And I think the fact that Luke said, you know what, because there's good in the universe, or the Jedi are good or whatever, because I'm fighting evil is winning. That's the ridiculous notion to me.
It's also what is the Force? I'm glad we didn't do the metachlorian thing. That's why I really didn't care for the prequels, all this stuff. We're getting back to what the Force is, right? And I think his scene with Yoda really said a lot, and that meant a lot. And his short scene, his force scene with his sister, okay, there was something there, but it just
dice.
Yeah, I know, but it just ultimately
It go.
ultimately left fans wanting. I want to defend parts of it because honestly, the story, if you take it outside of Star Wars, it could be a really interesting story. But because you're dealing with flipping Luke Skywalker, who's everybody's childhood hero, and you're messing with that, you're messing with the OG, it's going to be taken. It's going to be a hard sell.
It's not going to be good. Yeah. By the way, side note, Kathleen Kennedy is trending. I think she's got fired again.
Oh, again?
Yeah.
For the third time this year?
Everybody keeps saying that, but it doesn't happen. I mean, you know what? The Mandalorian, Rogue One, there's good Star Wars coming out now. So for all the crap that people give Kathleen Kennedy, and she's deserving of, there's also a lot of good stuff coming out that she's trying to learn from things.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that Kathleen Kennedy has nothing to do with Mandalorian. She just hired John Favreau to save the
but she
franchise.
hired him. She hired him. It's kind of it's like Alex Kurtzman. Everybody gives him crap, and it's look, he hired Terry Matalas, and he made Picard season 3. So you can't, yes, you can critique some of the things, but there's good things in there too.
Mm-hmm.
Just put it out there.
And again,
can I
yes,
just
please.
I loved that we got another throwback to Akira Kurosawa. So the whole premise of the original Star Wars, the whole plot is based on Akira Kurosawa's film The Hidden Fortress. That was one of Lucas's biggest inspirations. So Rian Johnson goes and he pulls plot elements from Rashomon, where we have
What was that?
Rashomon is this story of a young woman who is attacked by a wandering maybe samurai, but we get the story from 3 different perspectives over the course of the film Rashomon. the whole thing is told from 3 different characters' perspectives, and it's never exactly the same because everybody has different views on how everything happened, which is what we get with the whole scene with Luke and Ben, and we get various different perspectives on that, and that's just a nice kind of nod to the origins of Star Wars. So, I mean, that things like that give me reason to give it a little more credit than a lot of the fans will.
It also had a nice hope at the end where even the little guy can have the Force, right? Like that kid.
Oh, Broom Boy.
No,
I like
love
that.
the Broom Boy.
Yeah, you know, and that
Broom Boy can go sweep up my crap.
The whole galaxy could rise up. You know what I mean? Like there's potential that the Force is not just this exclusive little thing to the Skywalker family, that it expands beyond that.
But you know what,
did
though?
like that.
It's interesting though, because I have read a lot of comments regarding the Force being exclusive to the Skywalker family. It never was.
No, that's true.
I mean,
that's true.
Where is this coming from? Like, what?
Yeah,
why is it like people are like, oh, you can't. I mean, of course, it's been strong with the Skywalker family, but look at the prequels. I mean, there's Force users all over the place that are not called Skywalker.
But they're always ancillary characters, except in like the animated series, right? Like that's where they really shine. If you look at the movies, like even the prequel series, it's not like they're getting top billing. It's always the Skywalker family that's the strongest, and that's
well, it's because George is. It's because it's the saga of this particular family in this trilogy. I mean,
right.
That's
part of the problem about how they handled the Skywalker family is because it is their story, and you're trying to veer away from it in this. I think that's what the biggest problem people had. Aren't you telling the Skywalker story? And then they did a big 360 in the next movie to try to correct that, and it didn't exactly land well. But I do think I like the idea of like other people showing Force sensitivity again, because you didn't really get that in the OG trilogy, right? It was like Luke had the Force, maybe Leia had it a little bit, right?
We don't know, right?
But I like the expanding it. Yes, they did it in the prequels, and you see that in like the Clone Wars and all that. But I like that part. I was trying to find some good stuff in a movie that was very divisive, you know?
I feel like the Force has always been about balance too. Like that's why at the end of Revenge of the Sith, you're left with 2-3 Force users. You know, you got Palpatine and Vader, and Obi-Wan and Yoda, 2 and 2. Like that's the balance now.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of Return of the Jedi, and it's off balance now because Palpatine and Vader are gone, and you have Luke and Leia that are technically Force users, I guess. So it just seemed weird in this one too that they didn't even talk about any sort of balance or anything like that. It was just, oh, now we got the Knights of Ren from wherever.
Who the hell are they? Right.
And Snoke does things too. You know, like the Jedi Academy would have been cool to expand on a little bit more. We don't know how many people Luke trained. I mean, and even still we don't know, because as far as I know, the only other Jedi he's trained is Grogu.
There's a comic book that explains a little bit about the Jedi Academy right before The Last Jedi, and I forgot, but yeah, it's
a little bit more in depth.
But it's kind of like, you know, the comic books and some of the novels came out after the sequel trilogy to kind of help explain and or fix some of the narrative that was lacking. Yeah, and I, you know. And, you know, a lot of people
in those plot holes.
Yeah. And a lot of people kind of relate that to what the Clone Wars animated series did for the prequels. But I think that's a whole different scenario. I think the Clone Wars, you know, they were explained. A lot of stuff in the prequels were explained and laid out. And George did I think a decent job in telling you. And obviously we knew about the Clone Wars from the original series. I mean, they were mentioned. You can kind of extrapolate.
The Legends books kind of dove a little bit more.
Yeah, and not getting into legend stuff, but I think you know, the excuse that you know, the books for the sequel trilogy is the same thing as the Clone Wars for the prequels is all BS.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
think
make
you
any
also
sense,
have to
'cause-
go to secondary and tertiary sources for things. It starts to get a little
Yeah.
tiring for fans. Like you want
Right.
to see your
Write a
heroes
good
on
script
screen.
write a good script at the top, and then just go from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and how long do we need it to be the Skywalker saga? Well, I mean,
Well, you know,
they're fan favorites. I don't know.
yeah,
It's like
but
saying
I really
how
do-
long do we need like Pike or Picard or Seven or
or
I
Indiana Jones.
yeah.
This is a good
No, but
question. Are we mad at George for selling Disney, or mad at George for selling, or Disney for making? I am just kind of mad at both sides.
No,
I don't think George
would-
was up to the task though, based on the
I don't-
prequels. So I don't know if he would have done.
No, but he could have wrote a script and then it gave it to
I
somebody
think
else.
I'm
you
more
know?
mad at George for selling to Disney, because I think, because he was the creator of this galaxy far, far away. I think it should have stayed with him until he was done telling the story. And he said he had story ideas for 7, 8, and 9. He should have stuck with it, stayed with it, created this legacy of 9 films that were his blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
And now we don't have that. And it's too bad. So I'm not.
I
But he also
I think that
leaned-
would have
he
made more
leaned
sense
on
if
other
he'd done
writers.
it 20 years ago.
He
I
leaned on
think-
other writers. And,
Oh yeah. He leaned on other writers, and then he, obviously.
But he didn't
I mean,
for the prequels. And what Phil is saying about 20 years ago, yes, please go, because yeah.
I mean, if he wanted to do, if George had wanted to do them himself, he needed to do them,
A long time ago.
a long time ago. He needed to not. There was so much of a plot gap left in that was filled in by the old EU, and when they decided when time, actual time in the real world necessitated that they undo that and reset canon, that shifted everything. But
And
shifted.
Picard did this too. It reset
Yeah.
canon
Oh, yeah.
like a
But,
little bit with the Litverse.
Getting back to the Star Wars comment, Phil, the normies are not aware of expanded universe when it comes to Star Wars
Right.
and the lore.
Right.
So
Oh, no,
all they
no.
see is the movies. All they see is the movies.
I would
So-
consider myself a normie for the most part, because I've seen Clone Wars. I've seen but I don't delve too deeply into it. So I count myself there, and that's what makes me upset that we never saw like our big 3 together,
Mm,
and that it was just
Easy.
hand waved a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. it's nuts.
We got to move on from this one. We could
No,
talk
let's
about
keep
Last
talking.
Jedi for a while, but
Rant.
I do want to give the ratings. Let's see. Jessie left a little while ago, but her rating for Last Jedi was 7 out of 10, and season 2 was a 3 out of 10. Jacob's rating for Last Jedi was a 10 out of 10. Wow.
Jeez.
And Picard season 2 was a 7 out of 10. And I think that's the fun thing about Last Jedi is it's so divisive that you have people that are on this extreme and you have people that are on the bottom extreme, and they will defend it until they die.
And again,
will
there's
die
no
on
there's
whatever
no
hill
middle
they're on.
ground.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground. And I think I'm finding that to be true for a lot of movies these days. I mean, I went to go see Indiana Jones 5. We just had a show on it last night. And yeah, I mean, on Twitter, you see people that are like, "Oh my God, it's the best thing since sliced bread," and then you see people that, "Oh my God, they ruined another legacy character." It's like, geez, where God, man,
It's got to be
hell?
some sort of middle
I
ground.
did hear somebody refer to it today as the Indiana Jones and the butt dial of destiny.
That's
Oh my
funny.
God, that's good.
You can't make fans happy. That's the thing. You can't make everybody
Right.
happy, and you've got to tell your story. I think at the end of the day, if you're the writer, you're the creative, you're the actor, like you just have to do the best you can at your job, but do your research. And yes, somebody had said it's all about making money. That's the instinct, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to make money, then it's not about just listening to the fans, because the fans don't always have a tap on what they actually do want. I think we're seeing that, but it is about having your pulse on the fandom as a whole and being like, okay, what can we get away with that's different? But also, how can we honor what's come before? And that balance, just like the Force needs balance,
Sure.
so do
Mhm.
these things, right?
And so do the fans. If Sudden but
Yeah.
Inevitable says the name Ryan Johnson one more time, I'm going to
Oh, Jesse.
used an ice
I
pick
love it.
to remove my eyes.
And Jesse's the kid that'll die on that hill too.
I
For,
know,
like,
I know.
He's
he
adamant.
loves it.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
Well, listen,
Totally.
I wish, who was it that gave it a 10?
Jacob.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad he's not on here. Too bad Jesse's
Yeah.
not on here.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you know, we'll have another Trek Wars episode, I'm sure. That, like I said, I really want to do
come
an,
on, we gotta.
really want to do a Strange New Worlds versus the Mandalorian at some point because
Going down. I feel it reminds me of those. Remember those claymation things on MTV? The
Celebrity Death
Celebrity
Death
Deathmatch.
Match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Jesse, you're always in toddler mode. dude.
That's
So
what we love about you.
I'm gonna move on to the final parts of these things here. The Rise of Skywalker in season 3 of Picard. Again, we'll do the same thing. I'll read my little synopsis, what I thought about it, give my rating, and then we'll go around the room and do this again. So I'm gonna start with Picard season 3 though this time, and I rated that a 9 out of 10. And I had said, this is what we were waiting for since season 1. What a wonderful ride through nostalgia with our favorite original crew of the Enterprise. Okay, I know it's not the original crew, but you know what I'm saying. I absolutely loved where this story went. The suspense, the reveals, all the nostalgia I just mentioned culminated into 10 episodes was just a treat. All the heartache and questions we had after season 2 were erased during the season, except what happened to Picard's new lady, whatever. Personally, we could have just had.
She's
this
on Chal
season.
Talk 4. She's
Yeah.
fine. She's
Oh,
Tal Shiar agent. She's gonna be
Oh,
okay,
God.
guys. She never needed Picard. It's fine.
Right. But I think personally, we could have just had this season, and everything would have been fine. This is Picard. This is what we wanted, and I enjoyed every minute of it except when Shaw died. That kind of sucked. But yeah, I mean, season 3 was for me the best out of the 3, and like I said, I think we could have just had that one, and it would have been all right. Now, as far as Rise of Skywalker goes, that is a 2 out of 10 for me. Can't get much worse than that, unless you're Ro. Then you can get worse than that.
Yes.
But, I can't, man. We spent the first 20 minutes of this movie retconning The Last Jedi and receiving rapid plot points one after the other. Bam, 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 bam. And then somehow Palpatine returned. What the actual fuck? Why? The rest of this movie just turns into basically Indiana Jones in space. Not even Lando or Wedge could save this dumpster fire, in my opinion. It is the worst Star Wars ever. I've only watched it through once, like I said, and it was in the theaters. It's the only Star Wars movie I don't own, and I can't. I've tried. I have watched. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try Rise of Skywalker again and see what happens. I get like 30 minutes in. I get to the part where Lando walks in, and I'm like, nope, off. I'm done.
You don't want to see the
and-
partying on Pisana?
Oh God, to me, The Last Jedi is a masterpiece compared to this movie.
Aye.
And at least that movie knew where it was going. Like
To the trash bin?
I mean, like I said, this to me is I can't. They ruined the Skywalker saga to me by making Rey a Skywalker, by making her a Palpatine.
Aren't you into the whole found family, though? I thought you were into the whole found
I'm
family.
into the found family, but I'm not into the, like, let's just write this in real quick to make it make sense. I mean, Michelle was right when it comes to, I would have rather her just been a nobody that was able to use the Force,
Yeah.
because it would have made more sense to have new Force users come in and
Sure.
take that torch from the Skywalker family. I mean, they're already going to make a new Rey movie. It would have
Right.
made more sense for her to be a nobody and go on like that and not continue the Star Wars saga, because, dude, this should have been the ending of the Star Wars saga, not the beginning of the Skywalker saga. It should have been the end of Skywalker, not the beginning of Skywalker Part 2.
Do we
Like,
all
it's-
really want to think about how Palpatine had a son? I mean, honestly, I don't really want to think about that.
Keep going, Sutton. Keep going. Taking my eye out.
I just like.
You know what's
Yeah,
funny?
Palpatine, why?
The new Ray movie, let the pissing contest continue. The new Ray movie, the first scene's going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm actually Ray Johnson, not Skywalker." Sorry.
Shots fired.
I would probably be okay with that because then at least they're getting rid of the Skywalker saga. Like, good Lord, what a dumpster fire! It just, man, and even in the theaters, I remember watching it in the theaters and at the end being like, I'm never gonna watch this again. This is terrible to me. And I've gotten in some Twitter arguments with people about it because there are so many people that really, really liked The Rise of Skywalker, and I just don't see it. I don't. That's, again, personal opinion. You know, Ro hates Last Jedi. I hate Rise of Skywalker.
It's
but
so
we can all
funny.
agree.
Yeah, to me, it's funny because I've had similar arguments with people on Twitter regarding hating The Rise of Skywalker but loving The Last Jedi. And like, to me, it's like backwards. It just doesn't make sense. It's bizarre. It's like, what bizarro planet am I on?
I think sometimes storytelling and the way that the acting and the way that certain scenes come across in The Last Jedi, at least for me, like I can watch that and be like, okay, this is a moving scene or this is trying to tell me something. In Rise of Skywalker, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with this Wayfinder? Oh, it's a dagger now. Oh, where's it going? Oh, look, Han's here, but he's like a projection of
Oh,
Ben
Poe has an
Solo. Like,
ex-girlfriend? What?
yeah, there was a lot of jumping around.
It was.
Well, God forbid people keep shipping Finn and Poe, so we've got to make it very clear that Poe has a girlfriend.
Oh, that's right. I would have much rather had that. That would have
Yeah.
been awesome. Like, come on now, breaking the norm there.
Or like Finn
I love
yelling
so many of
Ray
the
the whole
actors.
time.
Oh
I
my
love
God.
so many of the
Ray.
actors they brought in for this one. I just
Well, friends
mean-
of JJ for sure. Felicity, what's her
Oh,
name?
see, and
Yeah.
that made me a little sad to see, some of the characters that they were trying to introduce in Last Jedi just
Get
kind of got
sidelined.
sidelined because it's like, oh hey, JJ's friend wants to be in Star Wars.
Same thing. I mean, similar things happened in
looking at
Picard
you,
season
Dominic
3 with
Monaghan.
sidelining too.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love you, you stupid hobbit, but I love other people.
More.
Oh yeah, he was in there, huh?
Yes, he
Yeah.
was, and for
Just
no
for no
fucking
reason.
reason.
He like said one line, and it was right after Poe said somehow Palpatine returned. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, Palpatine returned in Fortnite.
Yeah.
That's right.
Somehow.
I forgot
Right,
about
yeah.
that. The laugh.
I just okay, Michelle. Let's go on to you. What's your rating
Okay.
for Rise of Skywalker in season 3?
All right. So Rise of Skywalker is my lowest at 5 out of 10 for the Star Wars sequels. And for Picard season 3, I gave it a 9 out of 10, which is a little high. I think I had it at, I hover between like an 8 and a 9 out of 10. And for this is my thing with Rise of Skywalker. It just felt like they were trying to like completely reverse The Last Jedi, but in a way that was like you're in the car, but it's like and it's just going around the whole movie, and you're like, wait, Palpatine's back? He's cloning Snoke? Oh, Snoke didn't matter. He was just a puppet. Like, oh, really? Rey is the granddaughter of Palpatine. Oh, that's why she's so powerful. Okay. And then it's like, oh, let's have Ben and Rey kiss. And then he dies because he's redeemed. And now he's a Force ghost. And it's like, what are you talking about? Why is everything happening with the Wayfinder, with the dad? Like everything's like, get to the next thing. C-3PO has red eyes and is evil because they have to hack into his, all of these things. They're not telling me a story that I care about. They're just trying to get from A to B to C to D,
And no consequence. The C-3PO thing drives me nuts.
What is
that?
What was
Zero
that?
consequence to that.
Yeah.
He was supposed to lose all of his memories, and then R2's like, oh, I got his shit saved on the cloud over here. Plug him in.
Yeah.
Oh, I had him backed up. It's all good.
Yeah.
Dumb.
C-3P. Oh no, no, that's good, Jesse. But I will say this about. I mean, I thought they tried to do right by Leia, but they just couldn't. And I really feel like this would have been a different film if Carrie Fisher was alive. They really had to scramble to rewrite. Phil, you were gonna.
Oh, I was just gonna say they would have had her working as a script doctor on it if she'd still been alive.
Yeah, I mean,
What's
because
her excuse
some
for the
actors
rest of the
can,
movie?
right? But
I loved her work. Just working on scripts throughout her whole career. It's just.
Well, I
She
mean,
would tear
sometimes
those
you
things
just have to
apart.
call a spade, and Carrie Fisher would do that.
Yeah.
And it was sad because she was so outside. She wasn't really part of the first two movies as much as she should have been. So it was like we were waiting for her moment. And we never got it. I know my co-host Jessie, she was, a huge Star Wars fan, huge Carrie Fisher fan. Very devastating for her to lose her icon, right? And for a lot. So when you have that real life, you kind of want to love the movie because it's Carrie Fisher's last movie.
Sure.
You want to give it some
Yeah.
like, okay, this is the last time we're going to see Leia. There were some beautiful moments. Like, okay, Harrison Ford came back. Okay, like, but ultimately, what was the point of the movie? Like, what were they trying to tell us? I don't
They
know.
just needed to wrap it up real quick. That's all it was.
Yeah,
Whereas,
but
like,
And
Picard season 3, they actually gave us a nice story.
So this is the. Go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and an abrupt end. I mean, just trying to
Ben just
push-
dying. Oh,
trying
wait,
to
no
push
consequences.
the sequel, trying to push the sequel out that quickly. When
Yeah. You know, and here's the thing with Picard season 3, because I'm actually pretty critical of certain parts of it. So
Mhm.
you know me, I love my Dr. Beverly Crusher. She was our space mom. Like her coming back in full force like that. Terry Metalis loves Gates McFadden and Beverly Crusher. So she got some really awesome stuff. She was very pivotal to plot points. Like she was sciencing, she was kicking butt. She was like very intelligent. She was important to the story. However, she was also yet again a mom, yet again a love interest for Picard, but not really. Like he really just that whole storyline was off screen and dropped like a hot potato, just like Laris was. They shouldn't have even had her in season 3. It didn't, you know, because she should have gone with him because she was an ex-Tal Shiar agent who was not Starfleet. Like if this was not a TNG reunion, which they say it's not, but it is, you know, Laris should have gone with Picard. And she didn't. She's on Chaltalk 4 doing her thing. But Beverly she's given this very tropey, very difficult storyline. And the only reason that it kind of worked is because of the writing. And it was that scene in sickbay in episode 3 in 17 seconds was written by 2 women. Now, yes, it was Terry's pitch and Terry worked on it too, but it was written from both perspectives. And that's what made it so powerful. But you had her, the CMO of the Enterprise, get accidentally pregnant and then hide the kid from Picard. You made her a bad guy when she's had almost no character development over 7 seasons and 4 movies. And Picard has had all the character. Like, you made her, like, this is the tropiest trope. And I really had issues with that. I still kind of have issues with it. But I let it go and enjoyed it, you know?
She's the MacGuffin.
Yeah, and she had really good points that I side with Bev on her decision, because I think, if anything, the series Star Trek Picard really soured me on Picard himself. I'm like, you're horrible to all your women that you've been involved with. You're horrible to like Raffi and Elnor. You abandon people. You give like you've changed, but not for the better.
But they gave an excuse, like they kind of explained why he was like that, right? You know, it's and I think everybody's got
his mom. Is that what you're?
I forgot about that. I mean, yeah, I guess you just can't relate. You can't relate. I mean, I don't know.
I think they were trying to say that the death of his mother, and listen, I think it's a great reason. Like the death of his mother, the way that she died, affected Picard. But the problem is he doesn't own that with Beverly. Beverly doesn't know what happened to his mother. Beverly doesn't know.
In season 2.
Yeah, Picard's telling Jack, oh my God, she wasn't in either of them. He doesn't even mention her. You don't even think he cares about her in the movies or Picard. And this is where it's like justice for Beverly. And she comes in and he's like, there's always been a barrier. He should be telling that to Beverly. Like, you know, you talk about Han and Leia. Like, imagine if it wasn't Leia in the Force Awakens, that it was some other chick, right? Like, and all of a sudden we have to like do that.
Kira.
Like,
Yeah, we get Kira back. We get.
But I think Picard, I mean, the good parts of Picard season 3 were that it did fan service right. Like, yes, we had all the ships, but they stole the cloaking device from the Klingon ship from the voyage home. That was awesome. They use it in the story. Terry Metalis told a good story, and there was great acting. And the story, I mean, good storytelling. I mean, emotional storytelling. There was some parts that were predictable, like the board, but you also had the changeling thing, which I thought was very interesting.
Bringing back so many elements from Deep Space Nine made me so happy, because it had just been so neglected with the Next Generation films. and then jumping immediately to the Kelvin verse, to the J.J. Abrams films, and just so many characters who just kind of got dropped until they needed to be referenced at some other point 20 years down the line. You know,
I do think the Data storyline could have been a little bit, I don't know. I didn't feel as many emotions during that whole thing that I thought I was going to.
But I don't
I
think
think
he
it's
doesn't need
execution.
anymore. Enough with Data. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
I
love
think-
Data,
can
but
agree
like
with that.
other
I think it was
characters needed
execution.
more.
Yeah.
Maybe,
We
maybe
could've-
that's why too, is because I'm just like, well, he's just gonna be back again. Maybe he's gonna die again in this season. And
I
they're
thought
gonna
they
bring him
did. They
back.
did a decent job with all the different. I mean, Marina Sirtis was not available as much, which is why she got sidelined a bit. I know fans are.
We'll make her a hostage. It'll be great.
And then I mean, the first scene she's in, it's the tropiest trope. She's the nagging new
The
mom,
nagging wife.
and
Mhm.
he's at the bar. And like, are we really doing this in a 24th century show? We're really making the women sound like shrill, while the dude is like, "Oh, I'll be right home, honey. Let me just down my drink with my best bud." There were a lot of like, it was a lot of elements of TNG, but I felt like some of the elements were not elements I appreciated from TNG a little bit.
Yes.
But I mean, overall, the story was emotional in terms of the father-son element. Yes, it was powerful. Ed Speleers.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Kind of like what
crushing it, as it were.
Crushing it. Who played the Adam Driver did for Kylo Ren. Like, I really felt like Adam Driver, you know, really carried the sequels. I think Ed Speleers and Gates McFadden, I mean, she knocked it out of the park with what she was given, but she would disappear for like half the episode. She wasn't really even in 2 episodes. She just looks at Picard and he knows that Jack is his son.
That was them doing Next
powerful,
Generation
but they-
callbacks.
Yeah.
But they don't focus on her emotional life. Like, if you look at Strange New Worlds and Una and that episode 2 of season 2 of Strange New Worlds, Una is having conversations with other women, by the way, which didn't happen a lot. Like, Seven and Beverly should have had a scene together, especially because of what was going on with Jack. And it may have been cut, but we didn't see it. Like, you know, so like the inner life of Beverly, and she got 2 minutes to defend herself, and then she was in regular Beverly Crusher mode. You know, but yeah, Worf was cool. I love the Worf Raffi stuff, but you know, and Seven,
He was pretty
Seven
much
and
just
Shaw. Seven and Shaw was cool. Shaw took a little while for me to warm up to, but he got more emotional life than Beverly really did.
I loved how you just expect their whole shtick, Riker and Picard rolling in. It's like, oh, surprise inspection.
Yeah.
And Shaw's just like,
I
no,
was like, no.
no.
Yeah, they did subvert
No.
expectations to a point. And I think ultimately, like, having all the characters together on the Enterprise D,
Mhm.
like, that's a direct, I feel like that's a shot to Star Wars. Like,
Mhm.
we
Oh,
are,
hell yeah.
we are
Absolutely.
doing this, we are
Yep.
bringing it back, and every character in that finale played a part in
Yes.
saving the universe, which
Yeah.
again, I'm
Yep.
kind of done with galaxy ending stakes, and I'm kind of done with the Borg. I hope they're finished. But
Mhm.
if we had to do it, yes, they were Picard's greatest enemy. It kind of makes sense to end on them, and that was where they started with this season. We want Picard's son to be the new Locutus, and for Picard to have to face that down and to be a father, which I will argue he was a father to Wesley, to Elnor, to Soji, to so many.
Sure.
It
to
wasn't.
Data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to
I-
Data. But again, but Beverly Crusher rocked it, and she's my favorite character. So what can I say? Jesse, the Jesse from my podcast, loves season 3. We've disagreed with it, but Jesse from Sudden Inevitable and Open Pike, and I and Marcy from Idle Ride, we did a little thing. I don't know when it's coming out about Picard season 3, and it does. You can critique that season. There's some not so great stuff, but I still 9 out of 10 for that. And then Star Wars left me with a bad taste in my mouth with The Last Jedi.
Ro, what about you? What's let's get your ratings for season 3 and Rise.
So,
of Skywalker. Did you even watch Rise of Skywalker?
Yes. So let me tell you, season 3 of Picard, as an actual dipshit from Chicago, I would say that I enjoyed it fairly well. I give season 3 of Picard a 9 out of 10. I think when it comes to fan service, there's obviously a line that a lot of movies and TV shows cross that becomes a little bit too much. I think Picard, every time they introduce something from old Trek, whether it was Next Generation or like Phil was saying, some elements from Deep Space Nine or some other um either plot point character or anything from the past. I almost felt like Leonardo DiCaprio in that meme that goes, oh, you know it was great to see, but I never felt like they crossed the line, like saying, oh, this is too much. I think, like Michelle was saying, every character really did have a role, a purpose, a part that they played in the narrative, in the plot. And I think it was great. I think, when it comes to Star Wars, it's interesting too, because I don't think that would be the same thing. um doesn't hold true to Star Wars. I think you're right. I think when all the characters got on the bridge of the Enterprise D, that was a kind of a dig to Star Wars. And I think I saw it on Twitter. I think there was a lot of memes that said,
Yes.
what Star Trek did and what Star Wars fans wanted. And yeah, so I getting back to some of the points that Michelle was talking about, I actually really enjoyed Leia's role in the Rise of Skywalker, although I know, a lot. And I think I enjoyed it more because I'm a very technical guy. I love behind the scenes. I love technology. I love the fact that they were able to use some of the old footage that Carrie Fisher actually shot, and then kind of compose scenes around it. So I think, to me, I think that's clever. I think that's cool. They did that in Rogue One as well. They took a lot of shots of the old X-wing fighter pilots, and
Mhm.
then
That stuff
put
was so
them
cool.
put them into this new environment. And I think that's really great. And they called some of the old actors in to revoice some new lines, to you know to basically put them in Scarif and say Scarif all over the place. So that was cool. So I'm a big proponent of technology, and I think George Lucas obviously is the reason that like for me, I do what I do professionally. So technology for me is really is great. But yeah, I mean, season 3 of Picard, I don't feel like there was a point in watching that I felt like it was too much. And I think it's because, like I said, I think everybody had a role to play. The story was great. There was a complexity to the story. Early on, it was almost like the whole JJ mystery box. Every episode was like, the one thing I will say is that every episode I did want to watch the next one. I didn't want to wait a week to watch what
Right.
happens next.
But that damn red door, Ro, come on.
Yeah. And I was thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, Red Door. And I thought maybe like Discovery was going to come into play because of the Red Angel and whatever. And I don't know. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Season 3 rating for me, what did I say? 9 out of 10. Rise of Skywalker, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10.
All right. Phil, what about you? Let's get your ratings on these last two properties here.
All right. Brace yourselves.
Ooh.
Rise of Skywalker. Again, in the moment, walking out of the theater that night, I was ecstatic. I had a blast in the moment, but again, kind of hindsight, looking back at it, I'd probably still give that one about a 6. Um, I
Dang, I'm the
I
lowest one here. Oof.
I enjoy J.J. Abrams films. Um, I did not like the complete just kind of ignoring of so much of what had happened in The Last Jedi. I didn't like the whole Palpatine coming back. Just I liked that we were, disregarding Snoke. It was like, oh no, that guy wasn't an issue. But I mean, yes, we get clone Palpatine in a lot of the old EU stuff.
Right.
And it's not the first time that kind of shit's happened. But there were so many things again in both of these, going into the prequel trilogy, we had an established story arc that we were going to follow. We knew we were getting Anakin and ending with Darth Vader. We knew that was going to happen. It was just a question of what happened along the way. With the sequel trilogy, we didn't have that, actual solid story arc planned out from the get-go. We just let directors go do their thing,
Right.
which would have been great if we were doing like an anthology TV series,
Right.
or playing around with, just shorter pieces, but doing that as the be all end all of this particular film epic, this family saga, suddenly it loses all of its cohesion. There's not even like the same core characters all the way through to keep it in one coherent mass, and it just drops off, and it was disappointing. And so I'm grateful to things like Andor and Mandalorian for giving me renewed faith in Star Wars as a franchise.
It took a minute to get there, but they've done a good job. I think
Yeah.
the weakest of everything is probably Boba Fett, and that's just because they needed to make something to fill in the gaps between Mandalorian season 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But other than that, like Obi-Wan was great, Andor was great. Mandalorian has been a staple in Star Wars right now. And what they're doing with that story, like I've said it forever now, like the Mandalorian Mando verse, that's
Mhm.
my sequel. That's my
Yeah.
sequel. Stuff.
And Jesse, probably actually, yeah. The throne room fight against the Praetorian guards, one of the best combat sequences I've ever seen in cinema.
Well, there wasn't a combat sequence other than that, though. I mean, aside from Finn flailing around in a forest and Rey and Kylo, fucking around on the Death Star ruins, like there wasn't much of a lightsaber battle at all in the sequels.
Yeah. And I know you like your staples there.
I do. I mean, it would have just been nice to see a little bit more. I mean, because it's a Star Wars. It's a Star Wars. It's a Star War. Where the Jedi? Like, where are the lightsabers and the blasters?
But I've had a hard time revisiting both the sequel trilogy as a whole. I've had a hard time revisiting.
Same.
Me too.
And
I'll watch Mandalorian over and over before I watch.
And I'm going back through Clone Wars again, and just I'm enjoying things. And I had so much hope that by bringing J.J. Abrams back, I thought maybe we'd at least get him to kind of tie stuff back together with stuff that he'd done in Force Awakens. And he really didn't.
I think he tried. I think, if you lift that middle movie out and you put them together, obviously they bookend really nicely, but I think it was too rushed because, he's left with I'll say it in quotes. He was left with a mess that was done by that middle movie. Like, where do you go?
And I think if they'd given him another year, if they'd just given him another year, they could have found a better, they could have written a better script to fill it in. They could have,
maybe, I don't know.
Saying like to further on Rose's point, the Rise of Skywalker should have been 2 movies.
Yeah.
Like that should
Yeah.
have been split into 2 movies and elaborated more on, finding
Well,
the map. And
It's because The
getting
Last
to-
Jedi should not have been made, period. So,
Well, and that's,
I
and that's
do
where the argument
think-
comes in too, because Last Jedi again was a good movie standalone. It was a standalone, fine movie, but like you said, it's smashed in between a different story that it kind of just didn't
There
work.
are so many elements of that. Like we could have done like a whole, like we could have done an entire film just in and around Canto Bight.
why?
I agree. Why?
Why did we do Solo?
You're
Why? We didn't really
comparing
want it,
Solo
but-
with Canto Bight?
I'm saying
Come
it had
on.
this. I'm saying it has the same potential. We could have, and Solo could have had a scene set in Canto Bight. We could have
That's
done.
true.
We could have just connected more things there.
Something to tie
There,
it in.
they got into the problem of just introducing too many new locations and too many new people. And
The only new location was Canto Bight. And then, I mean, they had the snow planet looking thing, but like, for the most
Great.
part, that movie was set in space on the ships.
I mean the sequel trilogy as a whole.
Oh, I got you.
I mean,
got you. I was
yeah,
like,
no,
I'm stuck
not
on Last
not,
Jedi. Sorry.
not just limited to Last Jedi, but just they, introducing, all the different locations that they decided to. It's like we could have gone back to places that had previously been established. We could have gone.
Tatooine again.
No, I mean
Mandalorian's fallen into that trap. Though. I'm kind of sick of Tatooine.
We redid Tatooine with Jakku. We get and Finn joking, Finn. Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku?
Yeah.
Now,
it's like,
now, can I just?
because desert planets are cheap to
Yeah.
film.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. But if you're looking at this as a story, right? Because that's what's compelling. The characters in the story. It's kind of like, what story was, Return of Skywalker really trying to tell? And I'm still not sure. So like things that happened in Picard that I was like Shaw dying, and in Star Wars, Ben Solo dying. You have 2 people that have done some, Shaw, obviously Ben more than Shaw, but you have
Some
2
character
characters
growth.
that need redemption, and you kill them off immediately so that they don't have to face the consequences for their actions. And it's kind of like, why do you do that? And it's a little bit of a parallel. Like you're like, okay, I guess you're off the hook now because you died.
And
you
Shaw
know,
Shaw had been all about consequences. That was his whole thing.
yeah.
It's like, no,
Seven.
you are,
How many times
you
was
are-
Seven sent to her room? Like
Right, yeah,
oh
like
my
a-
gosh. Some of the writing for the women in this series, in that season, I kind of am like, can we give them a little bit? Like everybody loved
them a little
Raffi
more
with
agency.
Worf because Worf was putting Raffi in her place. I'm like, listen, Raffi is like strong in season 3, but she really didn't have a lot to do that was important to the plot. Not a whole lot. And it's fine, like the whole family redemption, it kind of paralleled Beverly, but like you never have Raffi and Beverly talking about anything. You never have Seven and Bev talking about anything. And Seven, like she becomes the captain of the Enterprise. This is huge.
Yeah.
And but it feels like, was it? At least she's the captain because Shaw died? Like, not because she earned it. And she was ready to leave Starfleet. Like, what would have been powerful to me? Because Beverly left Starfleet to protect her son, right?
Yeah.
And she always had problems with Starfleet. She questioned the Prime Directive. She didn't like how they treated certain people that weren't in the Federation. She probably knew Seven because they were in the. She was, Seven was the Fenris Ranger,
Yeah.
Fenris Ranger, and Beverly was with the Mariposas, which connects back to season 2 with Rios.
I like
which is kinda
butterflies.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah, that was good.
but
That was good.
My thing is, they have a lot more in common, and for Beverly to have a moment in that bar set that was very well used, in season 3, for them to sit down and for her to be like, Seven, because again, Seven is also Borg, right? And now her son and Picard, like all the people important to her, are connected to the Borg. But at some point, to have Beverly and Seven have a scene where Beverly's like, yep, I know, I got my problems with Starfleet too. that you can't always play by the rules. You can't always play it safe, but Starfleet gives structure. Starfleet gives a purpose. Starfleet calls us to ideals higher than ourselves. And even sometimes when Starfleet is wrong, that's still calling us to higher, And she could have given Seven like a little push in that direction at some point during the season. And to see them getting an emotional arc, but there was no time because we had to do, and I love the Ro Laren stuff. I really do. But the dialogue in that
somehow Ro returned.
Yeah, it should have been Beverly's story. Oh, you broke my heart.
I cried.
You broke mine. I'm like, this is the conversation. Yeah. Like even Jesse pointed it out. He says, I love you to Raffi at the end of season 1 after 10 episodes with her. We never hear him say that to Beverly. And after all his barriers were up, after everything we went through with him in season 2, to see him not really like love Beverly at the end, even as just a friend, like they never touch, by the way, in the season. No one clocks it, but they never actually did any. They didn't hold hands. They didn't hug. There's a still shot of them doing this. It was not on screen. And you're kind of like left with, why is his relationship with Riker this season more important than his relationship with the mother of his son? Where they never, like they don't reconcile that sickbay scene except for him to say over subspace, you were right. And that was it. But I think ultimately Picard, like, yes, Beverly would have reminded Seven of Janeway. Like, there's all these things they could have done. But ultimately, the fans were cool with it because Jack was like the insert yourself character. He was the self-insert, hey, look at this cocky guy who's like if Jack had been a daughter, I don't know if it would have gone down the same with why is he always crying? Why is he so depressed? Why is he talking to Picard like that? Like people accepted it because Ed Speleers sold it. But I don't know if it would be different if it was like a Soji,
Yeah.
Because he was very volatile this season with his emotions. And he had a really nice connection with Beverly, but they still didn't really explore the mother-son thing that Gates McFadden had always said she wanted to do with Wesley. And then Wesley's just like, he's gone. Like, these throwaway things, and that's where it kind of, they didn't have time to do a lot of these things. But for me, like Star Trek, when you look at Star Wars and what they did, and you're like, yeah, absolutely, they did not do enough like they didn't do justice to the OG characters. They did pretty well in Picard season 3, but to me, the friendship I liked the most kind of got torpedoed a bit, and they didn't really rectify it for whatever reason. And I don't really want any more, like we can move to the Litverse of both Star Wars and Star Trek. And how they dealt with, Star Trek they basically blew up the post-Nemesis Litverse with Coda, while Star Wars made everything Legends, right? Mm-hmm. So, how they handled even their secondary canonical stuff is interesting. How Star Trek kind of veered away from what Star Wars had done, which I think is interesting. And I liked Coda. I didn't love that it erased everything and did an alternate timeline thing. But you had Picard and Beverly married with a kid in that book.
Yeah.
And it worked. And this is what they chose to do instead. So, for us to see on screen, and there's too much tell and not enough show for some of that. But ultimately, I think the reason Picard season 3 works better is because all the characters were together. There was humor, there was heart. There was a story that you could relate to. There's moments that made you cry in a good way, not because you couldn't believe what you were seeing on screen, but because were moved by
I couldn't believe that they brought Ro back.
That was great. I mean, again, going back to what I said earlier, that sometimes these shows fall in the trap of being too fan servicey, but I think this was the perfect mix. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
I did not expect Ro to come in, and I didn't expect the relationship between Ro and Picard to be so emotional for me personally. I love the character of Ro when she first appeared in The Next Generation. She was one of my favorites, and not just because she's got my name, but but she was, Michelle Forbes is phenomenal, and I liked her contribution to the Star Trek universe. And bringing her back in this was just icing on the cake for me.
It was brilliant.
It was wonderful, but it also for me, like I loved it because it gave closure to a character. It was really satisfying to fans because it was emotional. But imagine if they had that kind of resolution with Picard and Beverly, who have an even deeper connection. The
Yeah.
actors have amazing chemistry. Can you imagine having a scene like that with them? We didn't get it.
It would have
But
made a lot of sense to do that too.
well,
Yeah.
and because that was the central story of the season, they had this kid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I mean,
not
overall,
because it's a romance or because it's why is male female friendship like poo poo, like, oh, we can't do it, it's romance, it's this. But like, you know, Riker and Picard all day long with the bromance, I'm like, this is awesome. It's awesome. But you're not dealing with Picard and Beverly when they obviously had a really bad time of it. You set it up when Picard's like, it didn't end well. Well, what did you do? Because can you imagine Kirk and Spock? Like if something like that happened where it didn't end well. And I'm not talking romantic. Like I'm not even, you can, but I'm just saying, imagine if it was like, it just didn't end well. And we split.
Pretty sure there's an entire tag on an archive of our own about that.
Oh, I'm sure. But they split and then they don't come back together at the end. Like Picard and Beverly obviously were like dropping Jack off at Starfleet kindergarten because, he's gonna, but it was, and that's the other thing with names, right? They say that idea of names mean almost everything was one of my last points on these two franchises. So like Rey being called Skywalker versus the Titan being called the Enterprise G, right? Mm-hmm. So Rey is kind of taking on the name of Skywalker as kind of like this mantra, this flag of the Jedi, whereas and honoring what came before, whereas the Enterprise, like the Titan was renamed the Enterprise G to honor Picard and his crew and to get Seven, like in season 1, Picard, Seven said to Picard, "You owe me a ship," and then boom, end of season 3, she's captain of the Enterprise. Like there was some payoff there, but you can argue that either one of those decisions was kind of like Rey becoming a Skywalker versus and these are not original. Like I've heard other fans say this too. It's not like I'm, but I think that the Enterprise and the Skywalker thing, it's interesting. Like names mean, like to me, it was very important that Jack Crusher remained Jack Crusher. There will not be Beverly Crusher Erasure, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm very passionate about season 3 because there's a lot of great stuff, but there's also some things I wish they, if we have a legacy, maybe could be addressed. Yeah. We don't know.
I would probably have to give Picard season 3 a 9 out of 10. Brent Spiner rolling 4 or more different characters into single scenes, and selling every one of them on body language alone. The just shifting between Data and Lore and Soong and B4. I watched Nemesis.
Not Lal though.
Not Lal.
Sorry.
No, no, that's fair. But I mean, I watched Nemesis in the theaters. I have it on VHS. I
still like
not
Nemesis.
DVD, not Blu-ray.
No, I got it on VHS because I was in. I'm not going to talk about
the
how old I was when that came
cover out. That like you flip it and it's like the 3D thing that changes the image. You know what I'm talking about?
No, it's not the stereo thing. No.
Okay.
Picard season 3 is much
Picard
better than Nemesis.
Picard season 3 was much better closure to all of our next generation characters.
Yeah.
I one of my regrets with the existence of the series is that Rene Auberjonois died before he could have reprised the role of Odo. Because just imagine if they'd been able to actually pull Odo himself back and not just throw a reference to him.
It was sad they didn't have other Deep Space Nine characters in here,
right?
It was
especially because they got Armin Shimmerman and Nana Visitor back for their cameos on Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Which was spectacular. But just being able to bring anyone back. They brought Tim Russ back for the Tuvok bit. I was like,
I was really expecting Cisco to pop in there somewhere.
The actor he's off the grid, so I'm like, no, this is Avery Brooks ain't coming back.
I love
That's why I was so
Avery
surprised at
Brooks,
Michelle
but
Forbes, though.
Yeah,
Michelle, because I didn't think she would come back, but they convinced her.
Yeah, she had such a juicy role. I would
here's some closure for your character. You know?
But do you think the Changeling plot, like, did it? Because I sympathized with Vadic at the end.
Yeah.
And nothing was resolved with that. Like, they didn't really, instead of Picard and Beverly talking about how they wanted to murder her, maybe they should have been talking about consequences for the ethics that happened to her that drove her to that point. Because people aren't monsters, okay? They're not born monsters. They become that way because of their experiences for the most part, usually, right? And so I love that Vadic was more than just this two-dimensional villain, but then they just offed her, and then all of a sudden it was the Borg, and it's kind of like like the last episodes were their own thing, and then like Jack just turning on Picard because he's like, I'm gonna just put you away on Vulcan, and Picard, every time he talks to Jack, he's horrible. Like there's like
the flashback scene that we got with him and when Picard's out, having dinner, and he's Starfleet's my only family,
right?
And Jack is just like, well,
but Jack I feel like myself. That had to be about his mom though, because Picard didn't know, but they should have addressed that, because really what that is a dig at Beverly, because he's like, I didn't need a wife, I didn't need a family, I didn't, but he had a family. They were always a family.
I saw it as him just unintentionally, obviously, but just shooting down his chance to get to know his son, that his son even existed, several years prior. It's just like,
and the fact that Jack
coping mechanism, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's
understandable that Picard would do that, because he had his heart broken and he didn't really think it was a possibility. But did he look for Beverly? Like the whole problem of Beverly being gone from everyone for 23 years. If Picard went missing, if any one of them went missing, how does the
just
TNG
off the
crew
grid for 2 decades
not like have a reunion to go get her, like to make sure she's like to do a wellness, like that should have been made clear that they did search for her and they got like proof of life.
This is what happens when it's your doctor who goes missing.
Yeah. But no one's looking for Bev. Like Deanna is on the ship with Riker, and they got Thad, so they don't have time. Geordi's got his family. Data's dead. Picard, apparently, he has all this time on his vineyard. He doesn't.
Worf is meditating.
His 2 Tal Shiars. I think Worf maybe knew. I'm kind of thinking that, or maybe like they got in touch with somebody like O'Brien or Nurse Ogawa or somebody. And they're like, Bev is fine, but she's just off the grid and she doesn't want to be bothered.
I need more of Miles. I need more Miles O'Brien in my life.
Right?
Just always.
Like him and Wesley not being in it, like for Wesley to just be gone when he was supposed, like Picard doesn't even question it when Beverly's like, I lost Wesley. He's not like, what do you mean you lost Wesley? What happened to Wesley? Like he should care. Like, so that was like his son.
He'll be back.
But they want us to forget that. They want us. Beverly and Picard
you mean he's not
and Jack
in his
are
quarters
family.
watching TV?
I know, but like the whole idea, like they said, well, we didn't resolve their relationship, but they're family. And it's like, well, they were always family until you wrote this plot line about Beverly piecing out for 23 years. Like, and Picard not trying to find her. Again, those things that were left hanging and also like the lack of consequences. Jack was the reason that everything happened with the Borg, because he left the ship. He didn't turn himself in. He turned Anakin Skywalker, and I felt like that was the Anakin Skywalker moment of the series, and I saw it coming. And he's like telling his mother, I'm gonna show the Borg Queen, and Beverly's just like, no, you're not. I've been through this with like the trauma that this woman has gone through is not dealt with. She's the one who was gonna kill her husband, not her husband, kill Picard, kill Jack, the guy who was her husband in the novels. My apologies. And she locked her son away in the first episode to protect him. Then she had to blow up that thing to kill the Borg, to stop what was going on, which meant the death of her friends, her ex-lover, and her son. And she did it. And it's hardly acknowledged. But she's the reason that all stopped, because she blew up that thing. Like, she's, it's like it's like Luke Skywalker shooting into the Death Star. That's what Beverly did. And Picard, what did he do? He hugged his son. Yes, he went back into assimilation. Yes, he did that. But it's like he doesn't mention Beverly in any of that. She's not important to their connection. I'm just like, dude, tell your son that a good memory about your mom, his mom, or his other friends that he's just met. Like, maybe that'll help him come out of it. No, we don't do that. So,
we don't talk about our feelings here.
Well, that was the whole point, though. It was all about feelings this season. It was like,
And I think that's one danger when a team of writers have a task of writing this long narrative. Everybody's like this, and sometimes you need to step back and like really see where your benchmarks are, especially for arcs in a character that is an ensemble piece like the Next Generation was. A lot of things get forgotten or lost, maybe not developed as much because they want to focus on something else. But it is a shame that they don't step back and really take a look and see, well, what's going on? What's the last time we saw this happen? Can we tie it together? Can we develop it more? And again, I think that's just an inherent thing in episodic television, especially with something that is as complex as science fiction on the small screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you guys are all really onto something with all of your points here. Like, it's all of these shows and movies, they all were good in their own way for the most part, but a lot of them had so many issues that, like,
it's
as fans,
it's almost
of the
like
original
media
property,
is susceptible to flaws.
right? And as fans of those old properties, it's kind of like,
we really pick it apart now too, though. You know what I mean? Like, for all like,
I
think
and let's not pretend that that's anything
yeah.
new. Let's not pretend that that's anything new.
we just have more access.
Social media has ramped it up.
It has, but there were so many message board communities in the early 90s just nagging about all the various Trek stuff.
I think you need perspective and time too. So in let's look at this in 10 years and see how we feel. And,
all right, hang on.
I doubt your opinion on The Last Jedi will change, Ro. But
I am setting an alarm
for
That's awesome.
July 2nd, 2033.
From today.
It's a date.
Yes.
And you're right, Michelle. My opinion will not change.
But that all being said, let's do a quick rating of the entire series and sequel trilogy in a whole. And then we'll get on out of here. The show went on for a little bit longer than I anticipated, but it's been a really awesome.
That's what happens when you get a couple of nerds together to talk nerd stuff.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely. So Michelle, let's start with you. What would be your rating for the sequel trilogy and for Picard as a whole?
So sequel trilogy is going to be a 6 out of 10. It just ultimately failed for me, but there were some good moments. So 6 out of 10 for Star Wars, and then for Star Trek Picard, because of the last season and because my favorite character was so wonderful in a lot of ways, even though I still critique it, I give it an 8 out of 10 overall, because I did enjoy the stories and the characters. So if we didn't have it, I would be sad, I think. Although for me, it did kind of ruin Picard's character a little bit. But yeah, that's my ratings.
Wow. And you said what was the first? Picard was 8. Did you say 8?
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Cool. And Ro, what about you? What's your final ratings on them?
Picard, I would go 7 out of 10. There was a lot of really great stuff in season 3, and I enjoyed season 1 for the most part. Season 2 was quite a mess, so that's what brings it down. For me, the sequel trilogy is a solid 4.2 out of 10.
That's pretty good considering your rating for The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
It's on a curve.
I think I enjoyed Rise of Skywalker a little more than you guys did. It's still low on the totem pole for me, but The Force Awakens, I saw it in the theater like 7 times with different groups of friends because they all want to see Star Wars with me. But you know, I enjoyed The Force Awakens for the I guess the notion that it, you know, it set up a lot of really interesting things, and I couldn't wait to see what The Last Jedi had in store for us. But little did I know.
Yeah, right. Jeez.
Yeah.
Phil, what about you? What's your rating for both properties?
I probably gonna have to give the sequel trilogy overall a 6.5 out of 10, and Picard, call it an 8 out of 10 for the series as a whole.
Up top, Phil.
Yeah, and Ricky, buddy, we got to make you a gangster movie musical. I'm not sure how we'll make this work, but we'll
Star
make it
Wars,
work.
Star Trek crossover gangsta movie musical based on
We got
Star
to
Trek is the blood.
Evita.
a piece of the
Star Wars is
action.
Crips.
Yeah.
Is that what's
Yeah.
going on?
well, a little part a piece of the action and part what's Picard's
Dixon
holo
Hill.
novel, Dixon Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Beverly
Yeah.
and Picard look
And
quite
Picard.
dashing in that. I would, yes, let's do it. They can make up in that one. That'll be good.
So we all pretty much agree, and it's funny that on a Star Wars podcast I'm about to say this, but
That
my
Star
rating
Trek
for the
one.
sequel trilogy is 6 out of 10, and for Picard it's 8 out of 10.
Wow, Josh, look at that.
That would mean that for this first episode of the Trek Wars, Star Trek will win.
Whoa.
Which is kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy for someone that's done a Star Wars
I-
podcast for so long and
we
loves the
teed up
franchise,
we teed up a pretty difficult comparison on this one though.
yeah,
I mean,
and
Yeah,
this-
each one had different levels of awesomeness and different levels of garbage.
disappointing,
So,
yeah.
it's just,
Well, you know, because you have things that, and why did it work? Why did it not work? Like the Millennium Falcon in The Force Awakens versus the Enterprise D in Picard season 3. Like, why
Yep.
did one work better than the other, or did it? And fan service and writing. I think that really story and character is so pivotal in these, for all the millions and millions of dollars they spend on special effects, and it's important. Yes, we need the pew pews, we need the lightsaber fights, we need all of that. But at the end of the day, you gotta tell a
You gotta
good
have a good
story.
That's what George Lucas has always said. You can have some great special effects, but if the story isn't there, nobody's going to come.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a fun ending to this episode, because I did not really expect that for sure. But the more research I did myself, I was like, oh yeah, I don't like the sequel trilogy. So it's fun, and again, I think the next Trek Wars that I want to do is gonna pit some of the better properties of each one, like Mandalorian and Strange New Worlds. I would like to maybe do something like that, because it could be a really good argument, because those shows are both fantastic, and there's not too many flaws in either one. But yeah, this has been great, guys. I'm not even gonna do the math for these ratings, because we know
We know who won.
I don't wanna, like,
And yes,
twist the
Michelle,
knife or
we're all
anything,
winners.
so.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I like. We still all just get along in the Star Trek, Star Wars fandom. Like we can get along, even though we may like different things. It's okay.
Yeah. So let's go with Michelle. Tell us where everyone can find you and your podcast and that sort of stuff.
So you can find me on Twitter at OnTheRock81. You can also find me on Crusher Convo, where me and my co-host Jesse deep dive into episodes of TNG and even Star Trek Picard Season 3. We did do live react and reviews the same day. So those are pretty interesting to go back to listen to. But follow us on at Crusher Convo. We just launched our new website. And we have we're on all the podcasting realms, and Jessie really started up Crusher Convo with her love for Gates McFadden and Beverly Crusher. She's new to the fandom. She was always a Star Wars. That's why I feel so bad she's not here. She's a big Star Wars fan, but she felt, she really fell for Star Trek in the last year, and
cool.
she asked me to be part of the podcast, and I'm happy to be here tonight. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Heck yeah. Thanks for coming on, Michelle. It's been so much. We're going to have you back on for like an Ahsoka episode.
Awesome.
Love
I
to-
have
Yeah,
to
no,
I
that'll
have
be
to
a
watch
blast.
Yeah. Ro, what about you? Where can everyone find you and your podcasts and all that good stuff?
Sure. You can ask your smart speaker to play the latest Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast, and we will pop up. But available on podcatchers everywhere. Just search Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. We are part of the Red 5 network. I am a founding member of the network, and you can find the rest of our gang over at bio.link/Red5.
Nice. Phil, what about you? Where can everybody find you?
Well, most of the time, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at FlipWriter. You can find me on pretty much any recent episode of Quest Me. And for the next 5 weekends, you can find me at the Colorado Renaissance Festival.
Yeah.
So
Did you go to the Comic-Con today, or was the Renaissance Fair?
No,
Oh, okay.
I actually work at the Ren Fair. So,
oh, very cool.
yeah.
Very cool.
it's a fun weekend gig. So
yeah, and of course, Quest Me is going to be back in about a month to discuss the final book of the Thrawn trilogy,
dun, dun.
The Last Command, and then we will be coming back full force at the end of August for the Ahsoka series. I'm
Get it?
extremely
Get it?
excited for that stuff. And of course, you can find us anywhere. Just search Quest Me Podcast. I want to thank everyone that was in the live chat today. Jesse, other Jesse, Ricky, Claire, and anybody else that I might have missed. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you want to get in on these live podcasts, make sure to follow us on YouTube by searching youtube.com/@QuestMe. And again, on Twitter is probably the best way to communicate with me, just @QuestMe Podcast. So once again, thank you, Michelle, for coming on. Thank you, Ro, for coming on. Thank you, Phil, for jumping in right after work. This has been an extremely fun episode, and I cannot wait to do another Trek Wars because I feel like this could be a fun Quest Me side quest, if you will. And yeah, with that, we'll do like a quick little sign off. I will start, and then we'll go to Michelle, and then Ro, and then Phil, and then I will end it. So, for Quest Me, I have been your host,
Michelle.
Vote once, vote often, Ro.
I'm Phil.
and of course, my name is Josh. We are going to talk to you guys again really, really soon. May the Force be with you.
Live long and